Hey guys, tonight we're dropping you into the coldest permanently inhabited place on Earth, Yakutia, in Russia's Sakha Republic, where the thermometer hits minus 71 degrees Celsius and your eyelashes freeze mid-blink. Imagine air so cold it physically hurts to breathe, where your spit crackles before it hits the ground, and exposed skin gets frostbite in under 2 minutes. You're standing in a landscape that makes Antarctica look cozy, surrounded by endless taiga forest, and somewhere out there in the darkness, a pack of wolves has caught your scent. You probably won't survive this. Statistically speaking, humans aren't supposed to function at these temperatures, but that's exactly why we're here. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is for you. I always love seeing the global bedtime crew checking in. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the edge of Oymyakon, one of 2 villages that compete for the title of coldest inhabited place on Earth. The other contender is Verkhoyansk, about 400 miles north, but honestly, when you're splitting hairs at minus 70 degrees Celsius, the difference is academic. It's late January, which means you get about 3 hours of weak sunlight per day, if you can call that gray smudge on the horizon's sunlight. The rest is darkness, the kind of absolute, pressing darkness that makes you understand why ancient peoples feared the winter solstice. The village behind you consists of maybe 500 souls who've decided that yes, actually, living in a place where car engines need to run 24/7 or they'll never start again is perfectly reasonable. They're inside right now, huddled around their wood stoves, probably wondering what kind of idiot tourist decided to wander out past the last house as evening settled in. That would be you. You told yourself you wanted to experience the real Yakutia to understand what survival meant in this landscape. Congratulations, you're about to get a crash course. The cold here isn't like anywhere else you've experienced. It's not the wet, biting cold of a northeastern winter or even the dry cold of a Colorado mountain peak. This is cosmic cold, the kind of temperature where matter itself seems to slow down and give up. You're wearing everything you brought: thermal underwear, wool layers, a thick reindeer fur coat you bought from a local elder, fur-lined boots rated to minus 80 degrees Celsius, a hat that covers everything except your eyes, and mittens over glove liners. You look like a medieval knight made of fabric and fur. And you're still cold. Your breath doesn't just fog. It crystallizes instantly into tiny ice particles that the locals call the whisper of the stars. It's beautiful in a terrifying way, like your body is creating miniature snowflakes with every exhalation. The inside of your nose has frozen. You can feel the tiny hairs crisp with ice. Your eyelashes are accumulating frost. You blink, and they stick together for a half second before pulling apart with a sensation that's both bizarre and alarming. The landscape around you is otherworldly. The taiga stretches endlessly in every direction. Siberian larch trees, which are the only trees hardy enough to survive here, standing like skeletal sentries in the twilight. Their branches are completely bare, and frost has built up on the trunks in intricate patterns that catch what little light remains. The ground is buried under several feet of snow, but it's not the fluffy Christmas card snow you might imagine. This snow has been compressed and refrozen so many times it's more like concrete. You tried to kick through it earlier and nearly broke your toe. Everything is quiet. Not peaceful quiet, but empty quiet. The kind of silence that presses against your eardrums and makes you aware of your own heartbeat. Sound travels strangely at these temperatures, sometimes amplified, carrying for miles, and sometimes deadened, absorbed by the dense, frozen air. Right now, you can hear the creak of ice settling in the trees, the occasional crack as sap freezes and expands inside a trunk. These sounds should be reassuring, they're natural, expected, but instead, they make you jumpy because each one could be masking the sound of something else. You check your phone. No signal, obviously, and the battery has dropped from 80% to 15% in the 10 minutes you've been out here. Lithium-ion batteries hate cold. It's a well-documented fact that you're now experiencing firsthand. You power it off and tuck it deep inside your coat, against your chest, hoping your body heat will keep it alive. You brought a backup battery, but that's in your small pack, and you'd need to remove your mittens to get it out. Removing your mittens means exposing your hands. Exposing your hands means frostbite in about 90 seconds. Everything at this temperature becomes a calculated risk. The plan was simple. Walk out to the edge of the village, maybe a kilometer into the taiga, experience the landscape and walk back. You'd have dinner with your host family, share some stories, sleep in a warm bed. Easy. Except you got turned around. The landmarks you thought you'd memorized, that distinctive bent larch, the small frozen stream, all look identical in the failing light. You've been walking for what feels like an hour, and you should have hit the village by now. Instead, you're staring at more trees, more snow, more endless frozen wilderness. Panic is creeping in at the edges of your mind, but you push it down. Panic makes you breathe faster, use more energy, make mistakes. The Yakut people have lived here for over 1,300 years, since around the 13th or 14th century, when they migrated from the south and somehow decided this frozen hellscape was an improvement over wherever they came from. If they can survive, you can survive. You just need to think. First priority, shelter. You're not making it back to the village tonight, not in the dark, not when you don't know which direction to go. The temperature is already minus 65 degrees Celsius and dropping as night settles in. By midnight, it'll hit minus 71 degrees Celsius or worse. At those temperatures, you have maybe 30 minutes of continuous exposure before hypothermia starts shutting down your core functions. You need to get out of the wind and cold. Now, you scan the area. About 50 meters to your right, you spot a small depression in the snow. Maybe a dried stream bed or just a natural dip in the terrain. The larch trees are denser there, which means some protection from wind. It's not much, but it's something. You start trudging toward it, and immediately understand why the locals walk with a specific, shuffling gait. Lifting your feet high enough for a normal stride requires too much energy, and you break through the crusty snow surface with every step, sinking to mid-calf. It's exhausting. By the time you reach the depression, you're breathing hard, and that's dangerous. Each deep breath sends that brutally cold air deeper into your lungs. The locals breathe shallowly through their noses, warming the air before it reaches their lungs. You try to mimic this, but your body is demanding oxygen after the exertion. You force yourself to stand still, slow your breathing, and assess. The depression is about 2 meters deep and maybe 5 meters across. Several fallen logs, probably toppled during a summer storm years ago, lean against the near side, partially covered in snow. The trees overhead form a slight canopy, though canopy is generous for bare branches. Still, they'll provide some structure to work with. You've watched enough survival videos to know the basics. You need insulation from the ground, walls to block wind, and ideally a roof to trap what little heat your body produces. You drop to your knees, carefully, because sudden movements waste energy, and start digging at the snow with your mittened hands. It's like digging through ice. After 5 minutes of work, you've managed to hollow out a space barely large enough for your torso. Your hands are already going numb inside the mittens, and you realize with a jolt of fear that you're sweating. Sweat is death out here. Moisture conducts heat away from your body 30 times faster than dry fabric. If your base layers get wet, you're finished. You stop digging and sit back, forcing yourself to think. The indigenous Saka people don't dig snow caves, or rather, they do, but not like this. They're smarter. They use what the landscape provides. You look at the fallen logs again. If you could pile snow and forest debris against them, create a lean-to structure with the logs as the main support, you'd have a basic windbreak. It won't be warm. Warm doesn't exist at minus 71 degrees Celsius, but it might be survivable. You stand up, which takes more effort than it should, and begin gathering what you can find. Branches that have fallen from the larches, brittle and frozen, but still useful. Clumps of moss that grow even here, though it's brown and desiccated under its coating of frost. You pile these against the logs, working methodically, trying not to rush. Rushing means sweating, means dying. You've got that memorized now. As you work, full darkness arrives. It doesn't gradually deepen. It slams down like a door closing. One moment you have that last sliver of gray light on the horizon, and the next it's gone, replaced by a darkness so complete you can't see your own hands when you hold them in front of your face. The only light comes from the stars, which are spectacular out here, undimmed by any light pollution. So numerous they look like spilled salt across black velvet. But stars don't provide enough light to build a shelter. You stop, disoriented, and realize you'll have to work mostly by touch. This is when you hear it, the first howl. It's distant, maybe a kilometer away, but sound carries strangely here, so it could be closer or farther. It's not like the howls you've heard in movies. Those are usually wolf dogs or recorded timber wolves. This is higher-pitched, wavering, almost mournful. It's the sound of a Siberian wolf, which is actually a subspecies distinct from the gray wolves you might know from North America or Europe. They're bigger, with thicker fur, and they've adapted to hunt in conditions that would kill most predators. A second howl answers the first, from a different direction. Then a third. Your hands freeze mid-reach for another branch. They're not just howling randomly, they're communicating, coordinating. Historians still argue whether wolves actually hunt in the strategic sense we attribute to them, or whether their pack behavior is more instinctive and opportunistic, but standing here in the dark, listening to them call to each other, the academic debate seems spectacularly irrelevant. What matters is this: you smell like food, you're alone, and you're in their territory. You've read that wolves are naturally afraid of humans, that attacks are extremely rare, that you're more likely to be struck by lightning than killed by a wolf. All of that is true in normal circumstances, but these aren't normal circumstances. You're in the most remote wilderness in Russia, in the middle of winter when prey is scarce and you're injured, or at least you're moving like you're injured, slowly and awkwardly, which is exactly how wolves identify vulnerable targets. To them, you're not a human with rights and feelings and people who'll miss you. You're 75 kilograms of protein stumbling around in their hunting grounds. Another howl, closer this time. Close enough that you can hear it end in a series of sharp barks. That's not communication with the pack. That's communication with you. They found you. You fumble at your belt for the knife you brought. A basic hunting knife, because the village elder insisted you carry one, and now you're pathetically grateful for his insistence. Your hands are shaking, whether from cold or fear you can't tell. Probably both. The knife feels impossibly small. You need fire. Fire is the universal deterrent, the thing that's kept wolves away from humans since the Pleistocene. But starting a fire at -71°C is borderline impossible. Matches won't strike because the wood is too cold. Lighters don't work because the fuel won't vaporize. Even the friction-based methods you've seen in survival videos assume normal temperatures, not this molecular-level cold. But you have to try. You drop to your knees beside your half-built shelter and start frantically gathering the driest materials you can find. The dead moss, some papery birch bark you strip from a nearby tree, and yes, even in this cold, birch bark is somewhat papery. It's like nature's waterproof paper and has saved countless lives. And the smallest, driest twigs. Your fingers are almost useless inside the mittens, so you make the calculated risk and strip them off, working as fast as you can. The cold hits your exposed hands like a physical blow. Within seconds, your fingers are aching. Within 15 seconds, they're burning. Within 30 seconds, they're going numb. You've got maybe a minute before frostbite starts doing permanent damage. You pull out your lighter, a disposable butane lighter you bought at the village store. You flick it once. Nothing. Again. Nothing. The butane has contracted in the cold, turning to liquid, refusing to vaporize. You cup your hands around it, trying to warm it with what little heat your body can provide. And that's when you hear the crunch of snow behind you. You spin around, and in the starlight you see them. Eyes, reflecting what little light exists, shining with that distinctive green-gold glow. 2 pairs. No, 3. Watching you from maybe 20 meters away, just at the edge of where you can see clearly. They're perfectly still. You're perfectly still. Nobody moves. And in this frozen tableau, you realize something that should have been obvious from the start. You're not just fighting the cold tonight. You're fighting for your life. The wolves don't move, and neither do you. It's a standoff that exists outside of normal time, each second stretching into something elastic and strange. Your exposed hands are screaming now, nerve endings firing distress signals that your brain interprets as both burning and freezing simultaneously. Which, fun fact, is exactly what's happening at the cellular level as ice crystals begin forming in your tissues. You've got maybe 10 more seconds before the damage becomes irreversible, but you can't look away from those eyes, can't show weakness, can't break the stalemate. Finally, with movements so slow they're almost geological, you pull your hands back inside your mittens and tuck them under your armpits. The pain that floods through them as blood tries to return to your fingers is extraordinary, like someone's driving hot needles under your fingernails. But you clamp your jaw shut and don't make a sound. Wolves key into sounds of distress. You will not be the squeaky prey animal. You refuse. The eyes watch. One pair blinks, a slow, deliberate closing and opening that somehow feels calculated. These aren't the half-starved, mange-ridden wolves of fairy tales. Siberian wolves are apex predators in an environment that tolerates no weakness. The adult males can weigh up to 80 kilograms, nearly as much as you, and they're built like Olympic wrestlers wrapped in 6 inches of winter coat. Their paws are massive, acting like natural snowshoes that let them move across snow that you sink through. Right now, they have every advantage. Numbers, familiarity with terrain, sensory superiority in darkness, and the patience of predators who know that time is their ally. You, on the other hand, have opposable thumbs and the theoretical ability to plan ahead. Doesn't feel like much at the moment. The lighter is useless in your mitten, and you're not taking your hands out again, which means fire is off the table for now. You need shelter first, something that protects your back, narrows the angles of approach, gives you a defensible position. The half-built lean-to behind you is pathetic, barely a pile of sticks and moss, but it's what you have. Moving slowly, maintaining eye contact with those green-gold stairs, you begin backing toward it. 3 steps back. 4. The wolves track your movement but don't advance. You can't see their bodies clearly in the darkness, just those floating eyes and occasionally the suggestion of a shape when one shifts position. It's profoundly unsettling, like negotiating with ghosts. When your heel hits the fallen log that forms the spine of your shelter, you nearly stumble, but catch yourself. The wolves' ears perk up. You can tell from the slight tilt of their heads, but still they don't move. They're assessing you. Prey that fights back isn't worth the energy expenditure unless they're desperate, and you can't tell yet if they're desperate. In a normal winter, wolves here feed on reindeer, musk deer, elk, and hares. But normal is a flexible concept in Yakutia. Historians still argue whether the severe winters of the late 17th century, part of the Little Ice Age, led to increased wolf attacks on humans, but the historical record shows that Russian settlers definitely believed it did, and they wrote extensive accounts of winter sieges where wolves surrounded villages for days. You're really hoping this isn't one of those winters. Keeping your eyes on the pack, you lower yourself to the ground and start working by feel, pulling branches and debris toward you, piling them against the log structure. The work is clumsy with mittened hands, but you're not taking them off again. Frostbite is cumulative, each exposure adds to the damage, and you've already pushed your luck once. Your fingers are still tingling painfully, which is actually good news. Tingling means the nerves are alive. It's when the tingling stops that you need to worry. You grab a long branch, something that fell from a larch during a storm probably years ago, now frozen solid and gray with age. It's about as thick as your wrist and maybe 2 meters long. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. You prop it against the log at an angle, creating a basic frame, then pile smaller branches across it. The structure you're building is essentially a debris hut, a shelter type that indigenous peoples across cold climates have used for millennia. The Saka people call a similar structure a balagan, though traditionally that refers to a more substantial structure made with poles and covered in bark and earth. You're building the desperate refugee version. Snow becomes your friend now. You scoop it carefully because it's heavy and dense, and pack it into the gaps between branches. Snow is actually an excellent insulator. Each flake is a tiny crystal structure with air trapped inside, and air is one of the best insulators nature provides. The Inuit people have known this forever. Their igloos work on this exact principle. Your shelter won't be an igloo, won't be anywhere near that sophisticated. But if you can trap enough dead air space around your body, you might survive until dawn. The wolves finally move. The eyes shift position, circling to your left, moving with that eerie silence that wolves manage despite walking on snow. You grab a fallen branch, anything you can reach, and hurl it in their direction. It lands with a soft whump in the snow, and the eyes pause. They're maybe 15 meters away now, close enough that if they decided to rush you, you'd have about 3 seconds to react. "Get out of here!" you shout, and your voice sounds strange, muffled and small, absorbed by the cold air and the forest. The wolves' heads tilt, interested. One of them makes a sound, a low woof that's somehow conversational, like it's commenting to the others. "See? Told you it was weird." You turn back to your shelter, working faster now. The structure needs a back wall, something solid that prevents wind from cutting straight through, and ideally a partial roof. You find a large piece of bark, probably blown down during a summer storm, and wedge it into place. More branches, more snow. Your arms are aching, your breath coming in short gasps that you're trying to control because hyperventilating in minus 71 degrees Celsius air can cause your lungs to freeze, which is exactly as bad as it sounds. The temperature is still dropping. You can feel it in the way the air seems to thicken, becoming almost syrupy, resistant to movement. At around minus 75 degrees Celsius, strange things start happening. Alcohol thermometers stop working because the alcohol freezes. Mercury thermometers actually work down to about minus 38 degrees Celsius when the mercury solidifies, but the locals here use spirit thermometers that can measure down to minus 80 degrees Celsius. You'd kill for a thermometer right now, some objective measurement of exactly how screwed you are, but you left yours back in the village, thinking you'd only be gone an hour. A branch cracks somewhere to your right, not behind where the eyes were, a new direction. They're flanking you, boxing you in. Classic wolf pack behavior. They don't just chase prey down. They're strategic, cutting off escape routes, coordinating attacks from multiple angles. The famous wolf biologist L. David Meck spent decades studying wolf behavior and found that packs have distinct hunting roles, though he later cautioned against anthropomorphizing their intelligence too much. They're not plotting your demise in any conscious sense. They're following instincts honed over millions of years of evolution. But the result is the same. They're hurting you, limiting your options, waiting for an opening. You grab more branches, working in a controlled frenzy now. The shelter is taking shape, a low, tunnel-like structure barely large enough for you to crawl into, with the log as its backbone and a frame of branches supporting a thick layer of debris and snow. The entrance faces away from where the wolves were last positioned, which might be meaningless since they're mobile, but it feels like a small tactical victory. The Yakut people, you remember reading, traditionally built their winter homes partially underground, using the earth itself as insulation. Their Balagan structures had thick walls made of earth and moss layered over wooden frames, with a central fire pit and a smoke hole in the roof. They understood something fundamental. In extreme cold, you don't fight the environment directly. You work with it, use its properties, the insulating quality of snow, the thermal mass of earth, the dead air trapped in organic materials. You're trying to apply these 1,000-year-old principles with about 15 minutes of panicked construction, which is suboptimal, but again, it's what you have. More movement. The eyes have multiplied, you count 5 pairs now, which means at least 5 wolves, though there could be more hanging back in darkness. Full pack. The social structure of wolf packs is actually fascinating and much more fluid than the old alpha male model suggested. That model, it turns out, was based on observations of captive wolves forced together unnaturally. In the wild, packs are usually just family groups, parents and their offspring from multiple years. The alpha is just dad, and the beta is just mom, and everyone cooperates because they're related and have a vested genetic interest in each other's survival. This information is not comforting. Family groups are actually more dangerous because they're more coordinated, more cooperative. They've hunted together since birth. You've finished the basic structure, and now you need to make it functional. You crawl inside. It's a tight squeeze even without your bulky layers, and immediately the wind drops. It's still brutally cold, but without wind chill, the temperature feels almost manageable. Almost. You're going to need to insulate the ground somehow, because lying directly on frozen earth will suck heat from your body through conduction faster than you can generate it. You back out and start gathering every piece of organic material you can find. More moss. There's surprisingly a lot of it once you know where to look, growing on the north sides of trees and around the bases. Dried grass poking through the snow. Pine needles from a rogue pine tree growing among the larches. Birch bark, which you peel off in sheets. The Saka people have used birch bark for everything, roofing, containers, even boats. It's water-resistant, flexible when warm, and available year-round. In summer, they harvest it carefully, taking only what the tree can spare. You're not being careful, you're ripping it off in chunks because survival etiquette takes a back seat to actual survival. You pile all of this inside your shelter, creating a mat about 4 inches thick. It's not a memory foam mattress, but it's a barrier between you and the frozen ground, and that matters. Heat, you remember from some half-forgotten physics class, transfers through conduction, convection, and radiation. You're trying to minimize all three. The shelter walls block convection, wind. The debris mat blocks conduction, ground contact. Your body heat trapped inside the small space will slowly, very slowly, raise the temperature through radiation. In theory, the temperature inside could reach minus 40 degrees Celsius or even minus 30 degrees Celsius. That's still 40 degrees below zero, cold enough to kill you in minutes if you were naked. But in your current layers, it might be survivable. The wolves are closer now. You can hear them moving, the soft crunch of snow under their massive paws, the occasional low rumble of communication. One of them huffs, a sharp exhalation that sounds almost frustrated. They're not used to prey that builds things, that changes the environment. Confuses them, which is good. Confused wolves are cautious wolves. You need to seal the entrance. Not completely, you need airflow or you'll suffocate or get carbon dioxide buildup, but enough to prevent wind and, more importantly, prevent a wolf from just walking in. You find several longer branches and weave them across the opening, creating a rough lattice, then pack snow around and through them. It's not a door, not even close, but it's an obstacle. It says, "This space is occupied. Entry requires effort. Maybe pick easier prey." Inside your shelter now, curled into a fetal position because that's the only position that fits, you conduct an inventory. Your body. Cold, exhausted, but intact. Fingers and toes. Painful but responsive. Face. Your cheeks feel wooden, which is concerning, but you can't do anything about that now. Clothing, dry so far, which is crucial. Supplies, 1 knife, 1 useless lighter, 1 dying phone, and about 6 hours until dawn, assuming dawn matters, assuming you survive that long, assuming the wolves don't decide you're worth the effort. The first wolf tests your defenses around midnight. You're guessing on the time since your phone is off and you're not checking it. You hear snuffling at the entrance, then a paw probing at the branch lattice. The whole structure shakes slightly. Your hand finds the knife, pulls it free of its sheath. The blade is about 6 inches long, which seems laughably inadequate. "No!" You shout, your voice cracking. "Get back!" The snuffling stops. You hear a low growl, more curious than aggressive. Then retreating footsteps. They're testing you, seeing if you'll panic, if you'll run, if you'll make yourself vulnerable. This is the wolf equivalent of a siege. Apply pressure, wait for weakness, exploit openings. It's a strategy that's worked for them for millions of years. You need to make noise, establish that this shelter is defended territory. You bang the knife handle against the log, creating a sharp crack that echoes in the small space. Then again, and again, a rhythm, the universal sound of occupied space. Move along. It's what early humans did around campfires, banging rocks and sticks together, creating acoustic barriers that announce their presence. The wolves draw back. You can track their movement by sound now, your other senses sharpening to compensate for the useless visual input. They're circling, regrouping, reassessing. You've bought yourself time. But time for what? You can't stay in this shelter forever. Dawn will come eventually, in about 6 or 7 hours based on the season, and then what? You still don't know which direction the village is. Your phone might survive until dawn if your body heat keeps it warm enough. Maybe you can get a signal, call for help. Maybe someone noticed you didn't come back for dinner. Maybe they've already sent a search party. Maybe is a cold comfort when you're surrounded by wolves at minus 71 degrees Celsius. You force yourself to stay calm, to think through the situation logically. The Saka people have lived alongside wolves for over a millennium. They've developed strategies, cultural knowledge about coexistence. The wolves typically avoid human settlements, prey on livestock only when desperate, and very rarely attack people. Very rarely isn't never, but it's something. These wolves are probably as uncomfortable with this situation as you are. They'd prefer you to be a nice, familiar reindeer, something that acts predictably. You're an anomaly, a puzzle to solve. And if you can stay an expensive puzzle, something that requires too much energy to solve, they might give up and find easier prey. You curl tighter, trying to preserve body heat, and settle in for the longest night of your life. Outside, the wolves pace and wait. Inside, you pace mentally and wait. It's a contest of endurance now, and the only question is who gets desperate first. The shelter creaks around you in the cold, ice contracting and expanding, wood settling. These sounds should be alarming, but instead they become weirdly comforting. Evidence that your structure exists, that it's holding. You've built something. With freezing hands and rising panic and no training, you've created a barrier between yourself and death. It's rough and provisional and probably wouldn't pass any building code ever written, but it's yours and it's working. For now. That's all you can ask for. For now. The cold inside your shelter is a living thing, a presence that wraps around you and squeezes. You've been lying here for maybe an hour, maybe 3. Time becomes elastic when you're fighting hypothermia and listening for wolves. Your internal thermostat has gone haywire, cycling between shivering fits that rack your whole body and strange, dangerous periods of warmth where your brain tries to convince you that actually, it's quite pleasant in here, maybe you should take off a layer or two. This is the beginning of paradoxical undressing, a symptom of severe hypothermia where victims become confused and start removing clothing right before they die. Your rational mind knows this, screams warnings, but the irrational part, the part that's being starved of oxygen as your blood vessels constrict to protect your core, whispers seductive lies about how much better you'd feel without that tight coat. You don't take off the coat. You actually check all your zippers and drawstrings, making sure everything is sealed. Small victories. The wolves have settled into a pattern. Every 20 minutes or so, one of them approaches the shelter, sniffs around the entrance, sometimes scratches at the branch lattice. You've started recognizing individuals by their sounds. There's one with a distinctly heavier footfall, probably the largest male, who huffs with what you've decided is irritation each time you bang your knife against the log. Another one makes a whining sound, almost questioning, like it's genuinely confused about what you are. A third barely makes any sound at all, moving like a ghost through the snow, which is somehow more terrifying than the noisy ones. Between their visits, you try to stay alert, but exhaustion pulls at you like an undertow. Sleeping seems impossible, you'd freeze or a wolf would break through or both. But your body doesn't care about logic. It's been operating in emergency mode for hours now, burning through energy reserves to keep your core temperature above the death threshold, and it wants to shut down to conserve what's left. You compromise by allowing yourself to drift into a kind of half-sleep, that twilight state where you're not quite awake but not quite unconscious. Your mind wanders to strange places. You think about fire obsessively, not the metaphorical fires of passion or desire, but actual physical combustion. The chemical reaction of fuel oxidizing rapidly, releasing heat and light. Right now, the ability to create and control fire seems like actual magic, like something that should be worshipped. The ancient Proto-Indo-Europeans had a fire god named Petu-Wr or something like that. The linguists reconstruct it from daughter languages, and you suddenly understand why. Fire isn't just useful. At these temperatures, fire is the difference between being human and being meat. Your lighter is still in your pocket, still useless. Butane won't vaporize below about -40 degrees Celsius, and you're well past that. You could try warming it against your body, but that would take hours and might not work anyway. Matches are a non-starter, you don't have any, and even if you did, the striking surface wouldn't work in this cold. The chemicals need friction-generated heat to ignite, and the cold saps that heat away faster than friction can create it. The Yakut people traditionally used flint and steel, striking sparks into tinder made from dried mushroom or charred cloth. Some of them still carry these tools, though most have switched to modern methods. You met an old man in the village. Mikhail, he said his name was, though he laughed when you tried to pronounce it with your American accent, who showed you his tinderbox, a small wooden container filled with strips of charred fabric and dried moss. He demonstrated the technique, striking a piece of flint against a curved steel striker, catching the spark in the char cloth, nursing it into a coal, then transferring that coal to a bundle of moss and blowing gently until flame appeared. It had seemed quaint, old-fashioned, a party trick for tourists. Now you'd trade everything you own for that tinderbox. Without fire, you're stuck with medieval survival strategies. Shelter, obviously, which you've handled. Insulation, check. Now you need to think about metabolic heat, keeping your body's furnace running. That means calories, which means food, which you don't have. You'd plan to be back for dinner. Remember? Weren't supposed to need trail rations for a simple hour-long walk. Except you do have food, technically. Your body is carrying reserves. An average human has enough stored fat to survive weeks without eating, though survival is a relative term. Your body is already breaking down those reserves, converting fat to energy to fuel the constant shivering that's keeping you alive. You can feel it happening, a peculiar hollowness in your stomach that has nothing to do with hunger and everything to do with your metabolism running at redline RPMs. The problem is hydration. You can survive weeks without food, but only days without water. And everything about this environment is trying to dehydrate you. Each breath you exhale carries moisture that immediately freezes. You're breathing out your water supply, losing it to the air, and there's no way to replenish it. You're surrounded by water in its solid form, of course millions of tons of frozen H2O, but you can't eat snow. That's Survival 101, a rule so fundamental that even you know it. Eating snow lowers your core temperature and uses more energy than it provides hydration. You need to melt snow first, which requires heat, which requires fire. Everything comes back to fire. You hear a different sound now, cutting through the constant soft noise of wind and settling ice. It's a sharp crack, like a rifle shot, echoing through the forest. Your first thought is hunter. Someone's out here, someone with a gun, someone who can help. You're halfway through unfurling yourself from your fetal position, getting ready to crawl out and shout for help, when your brain catches up and provides the real explanation. That wasn't a gunshot. That was a tree exploding. It happens at extreme temperatures. Water inside the tree cells freezes, expands, and the wood literally explodes from the internal pressure. The locals call them frost quakes or ice quakes, and they can sound exactly like gunfire. There's a term for it in Russian, mrzaboina, which translates roughly to frost crack. It's terrifying but harmless, unless you happen to be directly underneath when it happens. Another crack, closer this time, then another. The forest is alive with these explosive detonations, trees succumbing to the cold all around you. The wolves don't react much, they're used to it, but you're not, and each crack sends your heart rate spiking. Between the wolves and the exploding trees, your nervous system is getting one hell of a workout. You force yourself to calm down, to think strategically. You've survived several hours, which is a massive achievement. But eventually, morning will come. The sun will rise. Not that sunrise means much warmth at this latitude in January, but at least you'll have light. You'll be able to see the wolves, assess their numbers properly, and maybe figure out which direction leads back to civilization. The phone. You turned it off to save battery, tucked it against your chest. Maybe it's warm enough now to power on. Get one text message out before it dies. Worth a try. You maneuver awkwardly in the cramped space, trying to access your inner coat pocket without opening any outer layers. It's like playing Operation with frozen fingers and your life on the line. Finally, you feel the phone's smooth surface. You pull it out, cup it in your mittened hands, and press the power button. Nothing happens. You press again. Hold it down. Nothing. The battery icon flashes briefly, 3%, then the screen goes black. The cold has killed it despite your body heat, or maybe because you've been lying still so long your body heat has dropped below what's needed. Either way, the phone is dead. No calls for help, no GPS, no glowing screen to serve as a tiny, pathetic lantern. You're truly on your own. The despair that washes over you is almost physical, a weight pressing down on your chest. You allow yourself exactly 10 seconds of it, counting them out, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, and then you shove it away. Despair is a luxury for people who have energy to spare. You don't. Instead, you inventory your actual resources. Knowledge, you know roughly what time you left the village, around 4 p.m. What direction you were walking, northeast, you think, and how long you walked before getting turned around, maybe 40 minutes. That gives you a search radius of maybe 2 or 3 kilometers from the village, assuming you didn't walk in circles, which is a generous assumption. The village has about 500 people, which means at least a few dozen able-bodied adults who could form a search party. The question is whether they will. The thing about remote communities in extreme environments is they tend to have two attitudes toward outsiders: overwhelming hospitality or calculated indifference. The hospitality comes from understanding that survival requires cooperation, that anyone could be in need tomorrow. The indifference comes from the same understanding. If you're stupid enough to wander into the taiga in winter without proper preparation, well, that's Darwinism in action, and the community can't risk resources on every tourist who ignores basic safety protocols. You're hoping for hospitality, obviously, but you can't count on it. You need to plan for self-rescue. The wolves are quieter now. You haven't heard an approach in maybe 30 minutes. This could mean they've given up, moved on to easier prey. Or it could mean they've settled in for a long siege, conserving energy, waiting for you to make a mistake. Historians still argue whether patience is a cognitive trait in wolves or just an instinctive energy conservation strategy. But again, the distinction doesn't matter much from inside a shelter. You need to prepare for dawn, which means deciding what you'll do when light returns. Staying here isn't an option. The shelter is a temporary measure, and you have no food or water. You need to pick a direction and walk until you either find the village or die trying. Not a great plan, but the only one available. The Yakut people navigate using sun and stars and wind direction and the shape of snow drifts and probably 100 other environmental cues you couldn't recognize if your life depended on it, which it does. But you remember something, a detail from the walkout. The village is in a valley, following a frozen river. Rivers are navigation tools, natural highways through wilderness. If you can find a frozen waterway, it probably leads somewhere, and downstream probably leads toward human settlement because people build near water sources. You saw a stream earlier, or thought you did, one of those landmarks that looked distinctive until everything started looking identical. If you can find it again at dawn, follow it downstream, you might survive this. First, though, you have to survive until dawn. Your body has stopped shivering, which is bad. Shivering is your body's way of generating heat through muscle contractions. When you stop shivering in cold conditions, it means either you've warmed up, you haven't, or you're progressing into severe hypothermia and your body is shutting down non-essential functions. You try to force a shiver, contracting muscles deliberately, but they barely respond. Everything feels sluggish, distant, like you're operating your body via remote control with a weak signal. You need to move. Moving generates heat. The problem is your shelter is too small to move in, and leaving the shelter means facing the wolves and the full force of minus 71 degrees Celsius air. It's a terrible choice, but stasis is death, so you make yourself move. Just small movements. Flexing your toes inside your boots, clenching and unclenching your hands, tensing your leg muscles. It's exhausting, each movement requiring conscious effort, but your body temperature starts to climb, just slightly. The shivering returns, which hurts but means you're still alive. Outside, one of the wolves howls. It's answered by another farther away. They're still out there, still watching, still waiting. They've been waiting for millions of years. Really, their species predates modern humans. They were here when the last ice age ended, watching the megafauna die out, adapting, surviving. They'll be here long after you're gone, whether that's tomorrow or in 50 years. This thought should be depressing, but instead you find it oddly comforting. The wolves aren't malicious. They're not evil or cruel or even particularly interested in you as an individual. You're just a potential meal that's proving more difficult than expected. There's something clean about that, honest in a way that human conflicts never are. Another tree explodes in the distance, the sound echoing and re-echoing through the frozen forest. You're getting used to it now, your nervous system learning to categorize these noises as non-threatening. It's amazing how quickly humans adapt, how fast the impossible becomes merely difficult, then routine. 24 hours ago, the idea of spending a night in a stick shelter at minus 71 degrees Celsius surrounded by wolves would have seemed absurd, unsurvivable. Now you're doing it. You're not doing it well, but you're doing it. The darkness inside your shelter is absolute, but you've started to perceive it differently. Instead of a void, it's a presence, almost companionable. You and the darkness are in this together, waiting for dawn, keeping watch. Your other senses have sharpened. You can hear the minute crackle of frost forming on the outside of your shelter, the whisper of snow sliding off a branch, the distant crack of more trees succumbing to cold. And underneath all of that, so faint you might be imagining it, the sound of breathing that isn't yours. The wolves, stationed around your shelter, maintaining their vigil. They're cold too, you realize. They're burning calories standing out there, calories they need for hunting, for surviving the winter. Every hour they spend watching you is an hour they're not feeding. This siege is costing them. The question is whether it's costing them more than it's costing you. You shift position slightly, trying to relieve pressure on your hip, and feel something dig into your side. For a moment of pure panic, you think it's a wolf, somehow gotten inside. But then you realize it's just a branch, part of the debris mat you're lying on. You pull it out, examine it by touch. It's about as thick as your thumb, roughly straight, maybe half a meter long. A weapon. A better weapon than the knife for keeping distance. You could sharpen the end, create a spear, something to thrust at any wolf that gets too close. The Yakut people traditionally hunted with bows and spears and traps, before rifles became common. You're not going to hunt anything, but you could defend, and defending is all you need. You pull out your knife and start whittling at the branch's end, working entirely by touch. It's slow, awkward work with numb fingers, but it gives you something to focus on besides the cold and the fear and the waiting. Shave a bit. Feel the point. Shave more. The repetitive motion is meditative, almost hypnotic. You work on your spear. The wolves wait in the darkness, and slowly, infinitely slowly, the longest night of your life grinds toward dawn. Dawn doesn't arrive so much as the darkness grudgingly fades to a slightly less oppressive gray. You've been awake, if your current state can be called awake, for what feels like several lifetimes, and when the first hint of light begins seeping through the gaps in your shelter, you almost don't believe it. Part of you had started to think night was permanent here, that you'd wandered into some cosmic joke where the sun simply forgot about this part of the world. But no, there it is, light. Weak, anemic, barely enough to see your own hands. But it's something. You wait another 20 minutes, watching the gray deepen into a watery twilight, before you risk moving. Your body has stiffened during the night, muscles locked up from cold and stress, and unfurling yourself from the fetal position is an exercise in controlled agony. Every joint screams. Your knees make sounds like bubble wrap popping. You're pretty sure this is what being 90 years old feels like, assuming 90-year-olds routinely spend nights in frozen hellscapes surrounded by predators. You peer through the branch lattice at the entrance. Snow has drifted against it during the night, and you have to clear it carefully, testing each movement for watching eyes. The landscape that reveals itself is both beautiful and terrifying. The taiga stretches endlessly, trees coated in thick frost that makes them look like they've been dipped in white crystal. The snow reflects what little light exists, creating a strange luminescence that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere. And there, about 30 meters away, you see them. For wolves, lying in the snow. Not sleeping, their heads are up, ears alert, just resting, conserving energy. As you watch, a fifth one emerges from behind a tree, shakes itself in a spray of ice crystals, and lies down with the others. They look almost peaceful, like very large, very dangerous dogs having a camping trip. The largest one, you're sure it's the same heavy-footed male from last night, is watching your shelter. His eyes meet yours through the gaps in the branches, and there's a moment of pure communication that transcends species. His look says, "Still here? You're stubborn. I respect that. But I'm hungry, and you're still food." Your look back says, "Try me. I've got a pointy stick now." It's not much of a negotiation, but it's all you've got. The temperature has risen slightly. You'd guess to around minus 60 degrees Celsius, which would feel tropical if you weren't still hovering on the edge of hypothermia. The sun, when it finally drags itself above the horizon, provides almost no warmth. It's a pale disk, more like the moon, looking exhausted by the effort of rising. You get maybe 4 hours of this weak daylight before it gives up and sets again. For hours to find the village or find shelter or find anything that isn't death. You need food, need water, need heat. But first, you need to understand your situation tactically. The wolves haven't left, which means they're invested in you as a potential meal. But they also haven't attacked, which means they're not desperate yet. This is still a cost-benefit analysis from their perspective. Your goal is to tip that analysis firmly into the too expensive, not worth it category. The hunger moon, that's what various indigenous peoples called the late January moon, because this is when winter's grip is tightest, when stored food runs low, when both humans and animals start making desperate calculations about survival. The Saka people traditionally slaughtered livestock in early winter, preserving meat in natural freezers, basically holes in the permafrost that stay frozen year-round. By late January, those reserves would be depleting. Everyone's hungry. Everything's hungry. You're hungry in a way that goes beyond normal hunger, a hollow aching that you can feel in your bones. But the wolves are hungrier. They have to be. An adult wolf needs about 2 to 5 kilograms of meat per day, and in winter, prey is scarce. The reindeer herds have migrated, following whatever sparse vegetation they can find. The hares are hidden and their populations cycle anyway, some years abundant, some years nearly extinct. The wolves might not have had a solid meal in days. This should terrify you, but instead it gives you leverage. Because desperate wolves make mistakes, attack recklessly, take unnecessary risks. These wolves aren't desperate yet. They're still calculating, still cautious. If you can maintain that dynamic, you might survive. You need to move, and moving means leaving your shelter, but you can't just burst out into the open. That would trigger every predator instinct they have. Instead, you begin disassembling the entrance slowly, deliberately, making noise, letting them see every movement. You're broadcasting. I'm big. I'm confident. I'm not prey. Prey runs. Predators control their movements. It takes 15 minutes to clear enough space to crawl out, and during that time, the wolves watch without moving. Good. That's good. When you finally emerge, standing up slowly, your improvised spear in one hand and your knife in the other, you're gratified to see several of them stand up too. They're maintaining distance, respecting the threat you represent. For now, the cold hits you like a physical blow. Inside the shelter, your body heat had raised the temperature maybe 10 or 15 degrees. Out here, the full force of Yakutian winter crashes over you, and immediately you start shivering again. You need to move, need to generate heat, but you also need to not look like you're fleeing. It's a delicate balance. You scan the landscape, looking for anything familiar. That bent larch you thought you'd memorized, there are about 50 bent larches visible from where you're standing. The stream you thought you'd seen, where the hell is it? Everything is white and gray and slightly surreal, like a badly photocopied landscape. But wait, there. About 100 meters to your left, the trees form a natural corridor, a slight depression where snow has accumulated in a particular pattern. Smooth, slightly rippled, like frozen waves. That's what flowing water looks like when it freezes, when the current underneath creates patterns in the surface ice. That's a stream. Has to be. You start walking toward it, keeping your movements slow and steady. The wolves immediately rise and begin following, maintaining their 30-meter distance. It's a surreal procession. You in front, moving like an arthritic old man, 5 wolves behind, gliding silently across the snow. You look like some weird nature documentary titled Human Migration Patterns, the least successful episode. The snow is even harder to walk through this morning. Your legs sink with each step, and pulling them free requires enormous effort. You're burning calories you don't have, exhausting muscles that are already at their limit. After 50 meters, you have to stop and rest, leaning on your spear like a hiking stick, breathing hard. The wolves stop too. They're patient. They have all day. You force yourself forward. Another 50 meters. The corridor is definitely a frozen stream. As you get closer, you can see where the ice has buckled and cracked, revealing the black water underneath. In summer, this would be a laughing, babbling brook. Now it's a highway of ice, and more importantly, it's navigation. Streams flow downhill. Downhill usually leads to bigger streams, then rivers, then eventually human settlement. It's not a guarantee, but it's better than random wandering. You need to decide, upstream or downstream. Upstream might lead to the source, possibly a spring, possibly nothing useful. Downstream leads to larger water systems, to valleys where people build. The choice seems obvious, but there's a problem. Looking downstream, you see the corridor narrows, hemmed in by denser trees and steeper terrain. It would be slower going, harder to navigate, and more importantly, harder to defend. Looking upstream, the landscape opens up. Still taiga, still trees, but with more space to maneuver. It's a tactical decision versus a strategic one. Tactics: go upstream where you can see the wolves coming. Strategy: go downstream towards civilization. You're standing at this frozen crossroads, trying to make a decision that might determine whether you live or die, and your brain feels like it's operating through molasses. This is what hypothermia does. It doesn't just chill your body, it chills your cognition, makes simple choices feel insurmountable. You go downstream, strategy wins. Even if it's harder ground, even if it's more dangerous, it's the only direction that might lead to rescue. The wolves follow. 20 minutes later, you understand why this direction felt wrong. The stream corridor has narrowed to barely 3 meters wide, hemmed in by larches that grow almost directly from the ice. The trees create natural choke points, places where the wolves could easily cut you off. Worse, the terrain is getting more vertical. You're descending into a small ravine, and while that probably means you're following the water toward a larger valley, it also means you're giving up high ground. One of the wolves, the silent one, the ghost, has moved ahead. You can see it through the trees positioned downstream, blocking your path. The others have tightened their formation behind you. You're being herded. They're driving you into the ravine, into tighter terrain where your mobility advantage disappears. You stop. This is the moment. If you keep going, you're playing their game, letting them control the encounter. But if you go back, you're retreating, showing weakness, and they might interpret that as an opening to attack. There's a third option, the one you've been avoiding thinking about because it seems insane. You could try to scare them off. Really scare them. Make yourself such an unacceptable threat that they decide the entire endeavor isn't worth it. The Yakut people, you remember, have traditional methods for dealing with wolves. They'd bang pots and pans, create enormous noise, light fires, sometimes even charge toward the pack on horseback. The key was projecting confidence and aggression, convincing the wolves that attacking would be costly. Of course, those people had pots and pans and fires and horses. You have a stick and a knife and rapidly depleting energy reserves. But you also have something the wolves don't: the ability to conceptualize, to bluff, to pretend you're more dangerous than you actually are. Wolves are smart, but they're not that smart. They can't tell the difference between genuine threat and performed threat. To them, a human waving a stick and screaming is potentially as dangerous as a human with a rifle. You take a deep breath, carefully, because the cold air still hurts, and then you charge at the nearest wolf. Not a full sprint, because you'd fall on your face in the snow, but an aggressive, stumbling run, waving your spear, and screaming at the top of your lungs. Get out! Go! Leave! Not food. Not easy. Too expensive. The wolf you're charging toward, a smaller female, you think, jumps back, startled. Her ears go flat, her tail drops. She didn't expect this. Prey doesn't charge. You press the advantage, taking 3 more stomping steps toward her, stabbing the spear toward her face without getting close enough for her to grab it. She turns and bolts. The others scatter, confused. The ghost wolf downstream vanishes into the trees. The big male retreats about 20 meters but doesn't run. He's reassessing you, this bizarre creature that acts sometimes like prey and sometimes like predator. His head tilts, that same curious gesture from last night. You're breathing hard, adrenaline flooding your system, warming you temporarily. You've won this encounter, but it's a fragile victory. The wolves haven't left. They've just given you space. They're still hungry, still interested, still following. But you've changed the dynamic. You're not passive prey anymore. You're a problem. You turn back upstream, abandoning the downstream route. It was a trap, and you're not falling for it. Instead, you'll follow the stream up, try to loop around, find different terrain. The wolves watch you go, and after a minute, they begin following again. But the formation is looser now, more cautious. Good. Caution is your friend. The stream leads you upward, out of the narrow ravine into more open country. Your legs are screaming, your lungs burning, but you keep moving. Movement is life. Stopping is death. These are the only 2 rules that matter now. An hour later, or maybe 3 hours, time is weird when you're this cold and tired. You see something that makes your heart leap. A trail. Not a natural game trail, but a human-made path, worn into the snow by repeated use. Snowmobile tracks, semi-filled with fresh snow but still visible. This is a route between somewhere and somewhere else, which means people use it, which means civilization is on one end of it. You stand there, staring at those tracks like they're holy relics, and you almost cry. You don't, because crying would freeze your tears to your face. But the emotion is there, huge and overwhelming. Hope. Actual hope. The wolves sense the change in you. They stop, clustering together, having some kind of silent discussion. Then, almost as a unit, they turn and move away, fading back into the taiga. They're leaving. Either they've decided you're too much trouble, or they've sensed that you've found a route to human territory and they want no part of that. Wolves are smart enough to know that humans mean danger, firearms, traps, organized hunts. You turn to follow the snowmobile tracks, and then you see it. Smoke. Thin, gray, barely visible against the gray sky, but definitely smoke. And where there's smoke, there's fire. Where there's fire, there's people. You start walking faster, ignoring the pain, ignoring the exhaustion. You have a direction now. You have hope. And in the hunger moon of Yakutia, hope is the most valuable resource of all. The smoke column is maybe 2 kilometers away, close enough to see, far enough to feel like the moon. Each step toward it requires a negotiation between your brain, which is screaming, move faster, warmth is right there, and your body, which is politely informing you that it has reached the absolute limit of what's physically possible, and perhaps you'd like to just lie down in the snow and see what happens. The body makes some compelling arguments, honestly. The snow looks soft. Lying down would take so much less energy than walking. You keep walking. You've come too far, survived too much, to die within sight of rescue. The snowmobile tracks you're following show signs of regular use. Multiple vehicles, different tread patterns, some tracks more recent than others. This is a genuine route, probably connecting the main village to outlying camps or hunting cabins. The Saka people are semi-nomadic traditionally, maintaining seasonal camps for different activities. Summer fishing camps near rivers, winter hunting camps in the deep taiga, spring camps near calving grounds for reindeer. What you're hoping, praying really, is that this smoke belongs to one of those camps, and not to some atmospheric phenomenon that only looks like smoke, or to a forest fire, or to any of the other cruel tricks this landscape could play on you. The sun has reached its pathetic zenith, providing about as much warmth as a birthday candle held at arm's length. It's maybe 11 a.m., which means you have roughly 3 more hours of usable daylight before the world plunges back into darkness. 3 hours to reach that smoke, find shelter, and convince whoever's there that you're not a frostbitten hallucination. Your face has lost most sensation, which is concerning but also oddly convenient. If you can't feel the frostbite happening, it doesn't hurt, which means you can focus on walking. This logic is deeply flawed, the kind of reasoning that gets mountaineers killed, but you're well past rational thought. You're operating on pure forward momentum now, each step automatic, your brain having outsourced the mechanics of walking to some lower-level process that doesn't require conscious input. Behind you, in the distance, you hear a wolf howl. Just one, far away, possibly not even the same pack. Sounds mournful, lonely, and you feel a weird kinship with it. You're both just trying to survive winter. The wolf's howl gets no answer, and after a moment, the forest returns to its usual eerie quiet. The snowmobile tracks lead you through increasingly varied terrain. You pass through a section where the larches give way to a small clearing, probably a summer meadow, now buried under 3 meters of snow. The clearing is eerily beautiful, completely untouched except for your tracks and the vehicle trail. No animal prints, no disturbances. Just pure, pristine white stretching toward the horizon. In any other context, you'd stop to appreciate it, maybe take a photo. Right now, you barely glance at it. Beautiful doesn't mean survivable. On the far side of the clearing, the trail descends into a small depression, and you see your first sign of permanent human presence. A cairn. It's a simple structure, just rocks piled into a rough pyramid, maybe a meter tall, but it's clearly made, deliberately positioned as a marker or memorial. The Saka people sometimes build these at significant locations. crossroads, good hunting spots, places where someone died. You're not sure which this is, but you're grateful for it anyway. Cairns mean people were here, invested effort in marking the landscape, which means people might be here again. The trail splits beyond the cairn. One branch continues straight, following what looks like the main route. The other branch veers left, toward where you saw the smoke. You take the left branch without hesitation. The smoke is your North Star, your guiding light, and you'll follow it until you either reach its source or collapse trying. 20 minutes later, the smoke is much closer, maybe half a kilometer now, and you can see its source, a structure. It's not much, just a small cabin barely visible through the trees, but it has a chimney, and smoke is pouring from that chimney, which means fire, which means warmth, which means salvation. You try to speed up and immediately stumble, catching yourself on your spear before you faceplant into the snow. Your legs have moved beyond exhausted into some new category of dysfunction. Each step feels like you're dragging concrete blocks chained to your ankles. The cabin shimmers in your vision, seeming to recede and advance simultaneously, and you realize you might be experiencing the beginning stages of a wide-out hallucination, where your brain starts filling in details that aren't there because it's being starved of sensory input. But no, the cabin is real. You can see details now. Rough-hewn logs, darkened with age and weather, a roof made of what looks like metal sheets held down with rocks and logs, a single small window with something covering it from inside. Smoke continues pouring cheerfully from the chimney, and you've never loved smoke more in your entire life. You're 50 meters away when you see the horses. There are 3 of them, standing in a rough shelter made of poles and canvas, just behind the cabin. They're unlike any horses you've seen before. Short, stocky, covered in fur so thick they look like they're wearing shag carpets. Yakut horses, adapted over millennia to survive temperatures that would kill Arabian or thoroughbred horses in hours. These animals are one of the great success stories of adaptation. Horses that can survive minus 70 degrees Celsius temperatures by lowering their metabolic rate, growing winter coats up to 15 centimeters thick, and somehow finding enough food by pawing through snow to reach the dried grass underneath. The horses watch you approach with mild interest, their breath creating massive clouds of steam. They don't seem alarmed, which is good. If the horses were spooked, whoever's inside the cabin might come out armed and jumpy. Instead, they just observe, chewing methodically on whatever they've managed to dig up. You're 20 meters from the cabin door when it opens. A man emerges and your first thought is bear. He's massive, wearing so many layers of fur and hide that he's almost spherical, with just a small opening for his face, which is weathered and dark, covered in a frost-rimed beard. He's holding something, you tense, expecting a weapon, but it's just a pot which he's apparently emptying of dishwater. He glances up, sees you, and freezes mid-pour. For a long moment, neither of you moves. You must look absolutely deranged. Frost-covered, stumbling, clutching a sharpened stick like some kind of prehistoric warrior, with what you're sure is the expression of someone who's been awake for 30 hours fighting hypothermia and wolves. He's probably trying to decide if you're real or if he's experiencing some kind of isolation-induced psychosis. Help! You manage to croak. Your voice sounds like grinding gravel. Please. Lost. Cold. The man blinks. Then he drops the pot and starts moving toward you, surprisingly fast for someone wearing 40 kilograms of clothing. He's shouting something in Saka. You catch maybe 1 word in 5, your exhausted brain unable to process the language. But the tone is clear. Concern, urgency, commands. He reaches you, grabs your arm with a grip like a vice, and starts half-dragging, half-carrying you toward the cabin. You try to help, to walk under your own power, but your legs have apparently decided they're done with this whole locomotion thing and are staging a protest. The man doesn't seem to mind. He's supporting probably 90% of your weight, moving steadily through the snow, muttering what you assume are either prayers or curses. The interior of the cabin hits you like a physical force. It's warm, genuinely warm, maybe 15 degrees Celsius, which after spending a night at minus 71 degrees Celsius feels like walking into the sun. There's a massive wood stove in the center, roaring with fire, radiating heat in waves. Furs and hides cover the walls, providing insulation. A simple wooden bed frame in one corner, a table and chairs, supplies stacked neatly on shelves. It's basic, rustic, and absolutely the most beautiful room you've ever seen. The man deposits you in a chair near, but not too near, the stove. He's talking rapidly, asking questions in Saka, and you shake your head helplessly. English? Russian? You try. Your Russian is terrible, barely functional, but it's better than your non-existent Saka. He switches to Russian, heavily accented but understandable. You are tourist? From village. Oymyakon. You nod. Got lost. Yesterday. Walked all night. Wolves. His eyes widen at the word wolves, and he asks something rapid-fire that you don't catch. You just nod again, figuring whatever he's asking, the answer is probably yes. He disappears into a corner and returns with a massive mug of something steaming. Tea, maybe, or some kind of broth. You reach for it, and he stops you, gently pushing your hands away. Nyet. Slow. Too fast, you hurt. He tips the mug to your lips carefully, letting you take just a tiny sip. The liquid is warm, slightly salty, and absolutely transcendent. Every cell in your body seems to wake up and cheer. He lets you have another small sip, then pulls the mug away despite your protests. Medleno, he says firmly, slowly. First warm, then drink, then eat. You understand? Too fast. Body shock. You nod. You've heard of this rewarming shock where blood vessels dilate too quickly and blood pressure crashes. People have died from being warmed too rapidly after severe cold exposure. Historians still argue whether Napoleon's army suffered more from the retreat from Moscow itself or from the improper rewarming methods used when they reached shelter. But the principle is clear. Slow and steady saves lives. The man starts working on you methodically like a mechanic servicing a vehicle. He removes your outer mittens, examines your hands, makes a concerned noise. Your fingers are white and waxy, classic frostbite presentation. He doesn't try to warm them directly. No hot water, no direct heat. Just covers them with a dry cloth and lets the ambient room temperature do the work. Then your boots, which have frozen to your feet and require gentle manipulation to remove. Your toes are in similar condition to your fingers. He checks your face, peeling back your hat and scarf, and makes another concerned noise. Nose, cheeks, frostbite. Maybe bad, maybe not bad. We see. His Russian is simple, direct, but you understand perfectly. Maybe you'll lose some tissue. Maybe you won't. There's no point worrying about it now. He gives you more sips of the warm liquid. It's definitely tea, heavily sugared, possibly with some kind of animal fat mixed in, and gradually your body begins to remember what warmth feels like. The shivering returns with a vengeance, your whole frame shaking so violently the chair rattles. The man throws more furs over you, creating a cocoon, and the shivering gradually subsides. Wolves, he says, returning to the topic. You see wolves? How many? 5. You manage. Maybe more. They followed me all night. I built shelter. They waited. His eyebrows rise, impressed. You build shelter? In taiga? At night? In this cold? Didn't have choice. He laughs. A booming sound that fills the cabin. Da-da. No choice. Good. You live because no choice. Many people, they have choice, they give up. They sit down in snow, they say too hard. They die. You say no choice. You live. This is good philosophy. He introduces himself as Nikolai, though he says to call him Kolya. He's a hunter, spending the winter in this cabin checking trap lines and hunting sable, the small, weasel-like animals whose fur is worth absurd amounts of money in international markets. A good sable pelt can sell for hundreds of dollars, and Kolya explains that a good winter can earn him more money than most villagers see in a year. Of course, he adds with a grin, a bad winter can kill you, so there's balance. He's been out here for 2 weeks, planning to stay another week before heading back to Oymyakon. He has a satellite phone for emergencies, buried somewhere in his supplies, though he admits he rarely turns it on because the battery dies so quickly in the cold. He asks if you want him to call for a rescue, and you almost say yes, but then you see the look in his eyes, the slight disappointment, like you'd be confirming that you're just another soft tourist who needs to be rescued after making stupid decisions. Tomorrow, you say instead, if that's okay, I just need to rest, get warm, then I can walk back. The disappointment transforms into approval. Good. You rest today, tomorrow we see. Maybe you walk, maybe we take horse, maybe we call helicopter. We see how you are. He pauses. The wolves, they attack. No, they just waited, watched, tested the shelter a few times. But I made noise, scared them off. Kolya nods sagely. Wolves are, how you say, practical. They don't attack unless good reason. You make bad reason, too much noise, too much work, they leave. Find easier food. He pours more tea, lets you hold the mug yourself this time, your hands clumsy but functional. In old days, my grandfather's time, wolves were many more. They attack sometimes, yes, but now fewer wolves, they avoid people. You are lucky. Or maybe, he eyes you speculatively. Maybe you are not lucky, maybe you are smart. You respect wolves, they respect you. You're not sure it was quite that diplomatic, but you appreciate the framing. The rest of the day passes in a blur of warmth and gradual recovery. Kolya feeds you small amounts of food, dried meat that tastes like nothing you've ever had before. Sable, he explains with a grin, some kind of flatbread, more tea. Your body accepts it cautiously, your stomach cramping a bit but keeping everything down. He checks your extremities regularly, and gradually color returns to your fingers and toes. The pain, when sensation comes back fully, is extraordinary, like someone's hitting every nerve ending with a tiny hammer, but it's the good kind of pain, the still alive and healing kind. As twilight approaches, Kolya lights a kerosene lamp and starts working on his own projects. Sharpening knives, mending traps, the maintenance tasks that fill long winter evenings. You drift in and out of sleep, wrapped in furs near the stove, warm for the first time in what feels like years. At one point, you hear wolves howling in the distance. Kolya glances at you, sees you're awake, and smiles. You're friends, he says. They say goodbye. You listen to the howls, multiple voices harmonizing in that eerie way wolves do, and you realize he might be right. They sound different than last night, less menacing, more conversational. Just wolves being wolves, communicating across their territory, probably nothing to do with you at all. But still, you like to think they're acknowledging the encounter. Two species meeting in the darkness, both doing what they needed to survive, both walking away alive. In a landscape as harsh as this, that counts as a victory. You wake in the deep part of night, confused about where you are. The cabin is dark except for the dull red glow from the stove, and for a disoriented moment you think you're back in the shelter, surrounded by wolves, waiting for dawn. Then you remember Kolya, the cabin, safety. Your body remembers too. Every muscle aching, your face feeling like someone used it as a pincushion, your hands and feet throbbing with that deep, bone-level pain that comes from frostbite recovery. But you're warm. You're alive. Everything else is negotiable. You drift back to sleep and don't wake again until morning, when Kolya is already up, stoking the fire and preparing breakfast. The routine of it is comforting. The clank of pots, the crackle of wood, the smell of tea and cooking meat. These are sounds of civilization, of human habitation, of safety. You could get addicted to these sounds. How you feel? Kolya asks when he sees you're awake. His Russian sounds clearer this morning, or maybe your brain is just functioning better after real sleep. Like I got hit by a truck, you answer honestly. But better, definitely better. He nods, brings you tea and a bowl of something that's probably best not examined too closely. Tastes fine, savory, and warm, and that's all that matters. While you eat, he checks your extremities again, unwrapping your fingers and toes, examining them in the morning light filtering through the small window. Not so bad, he announces. Maybe you lose some skin, maybe some nail, but no tissue death, I think. You are lucky, or tough, maybe both. He rewraps everything carefully. Today you stay here, rest more. Tomorrow we decide about village. You're about to agree when you hear it howling. Not distant this time, but close. Very close. Multiple voices, coming from what sounds like just beyond the tree line near the cabin. Kolya's expression changes instantly, going from relaxed to alert. He moves to the window, peeks through the covering. Some kind of hide scraped thin enough to let light through, and mutters something in Saka that doesn't sound complimentary. What is it? You ask, already knowing the answer. Wolves. 7, maybe 8. They circle the cabin. He turns to you, his face serious. Your friends come back. Maybe they follow your trail here. Maybe they smell the horses. Either way, now is problem. 7 or 8 wolves. You dealt with 5 before, barely, and that was when they were just testing you, not fully committed. 7 or 8 wolves who've tracked you here, who might be getting desperate as winter tightens its grip. That's a different scenario entirely. The horses, you say. They're after the horses. Kolya nods grimly. The horse is big food. Much meat. 1 horse feed pack for week, maybe more. But these horses, they are expensive. Yakut horse is. He searches for the word. Heritage? Old breed, very tough, very valuable. I cannot lose them. He starts pulling on his outer layers, the process of bundling up that you remember all too well from yesterday. I go out, make noise, shoot gun maybe, scare them away. I'll come too, you say, starting to get up. He waves you back down. Yet, you rest. I do this many times. Is normal. But even as he says it, the howling intensifies. More voices join in, and you can hear something else now, lower sounds, growls and snarls, the audio signature of aggression ramping up. The horses whinny nervously from their shelter, the sound carrying clearly through the cabin's walls. Kolya's hand goes to the rifle mounted above the door. You hadn't noticed it before, but of course he has a rifle, everyone out here has a rifle, and he checks it with practiced efficiency. Then he pauses, listening. The howling has changed. It's not the calling across distance howl anymore. The one you heard last night in your shelter. This is higher pitched, more frantic, with sharp barks punctuating it. You don't need to be a wolf expert to recognize the sound of a pack working itself up, preparing for action. Sukin Sin, Kolya mutters, son of a bitch, and moves to the door. They are desperate. This is not good. He opens the door just a crack, and you get your first daylight look at the pack. They're positioned in a loose semicircle around the horse shelter, maybe 20 meters out. 8 of them, just as Kolya estimated. Even from this distance, you can see they're in rough shape, ribs showing through their winter coats, movements that suggest exhaustion and hunger. These aren't the calculating, cautious wolves from last night. These are desperate animals who've made the decision that the risk is worth the reward. The largest one, and you'd swear it's the same heavy-footed male from before, though you can't be certain, is closer to the horses than the others, hackles raised, teeth bared. He's the one leading this assault, the one who's convinced the pack that today's the day they stop being cautious and start being aggressive. Kolya raises the rifle and fires a shot into the air. The crack echoes across the taiga, sharp and authoritative. The wolves scatter, bolting away from the noise, and for a moment you think that's it, problem solved, they're gone. But they don't go far. They retreat maybe 50 meters and stop, regrouping, watching, waiting. Ito ploho, Kolya says quietly. This is bad. Normal wolves, they hear gun, they run far. These wolves, they hear gun, they run small. This means they are very hungry or very desperate or maybe sick. Maybe all 3. The pack mills around, and you can see the big male moving among them, body language suggesting communication, coordination. He's rallying them, convincing them to try again. And sure enough, after maybe 2 minutes, they start moving back toward the cabin. Slower this time, more cautious, but still coming. Kolya fires again, and again they scatter. But this time, they only go about 30 meters before stopping. They're learning. They're figuring out that the loud noise isn't actually hurting them, that it's just sound, that the real threat is whatever's beyond the noise, and if they can endure the noise, they get to the reward. I have maybe 15 bullets, Kolya says. I cannot shoot forever, and if I shoot wolf, kill wolf, then other wolves maybe eat dead wolf and go away. But maybe not. Maybe make them more angry, more desperate. And wolf pelt is not worth anything in winter, too thick, too rough. So I lose bullet and gain nothing. It's a calculation you understand viscously now. Everything in this environment is cost-benefit. Every action has a price. Kolya could kill a wolf, but bullets are precious, and killing one might just make the others more determined. Or he could wait them out, hope they get bored or find easier prey. But meanwhile, the horses are terrified, and if the wolves get past the defenses, those horses represent a massive loss. Financial, practical, and cultural. What do we do? You ask. Kolya is quiet for a moment, thinking. Then, old way, we make them think cost is too high. We use fire, noise, movement. We show we are many, not few. We defend territory like they defend territory. We speak wolf language. It sounds absolutely insane and also perfectly logical. The Saka people have coexisted with wolves for over 1,000 years. They understand wolf behavior not from textbooks but from lived experience, from centuries of trial and error. If Kolya says the solution is to speak wolf language, you're inclined to believe him. He starts pulling things out of storage. Bundles of dried grass and moss, several glass bottles that look like they once held vodka, a can of kerosene. We make torches, he explains. We make fire bottles, how you say, Molotov? But not to throw, just to show fire. Wolves fear fire more than gun. Fire is old fear, built in DNA, from before humans, from when fire was only from lightning and forest burn. Gun is new. Fire is ancient. You help him prepare, your frostbitten fingers clumsy but functional. He soaks rags in kerosene, stuffs them into bottles, creates makeshift torches from branches wrapped in the oiled cloth. The work is familiar somehow, primal, preparing defenses against predators, using fire as a weapon. This is what your ancestors did, what every human lineage did at some point. You're participating in a ritual that's older than agriculture, older than civilization. While you work, the wolves test the perimeter again. This time they're bolder, advancing to within 10 meters of the horse shelter. The horses are panicking now, moving in tight circles, their eyes rolling white. If they break out of their enclosure and bolt, they're dead. Wolves can run down a panicked horse in deep snow, separate it from safety, and tear it apart. The horses somehow know this, and their fear is palpable even from inside the cabin. Kolya hands you 2 torches and takes 3 himself, plus the rifle. We go out together. We make circle around horses, facing out. We wave fire, we shout, we be big and loud. You understand? Don't run. Don't show fear. Wolves respect strength, they respect pack. We are pack of 2, but we are pack with fire. This is advantage. You nod, your heart pounding. This is possibly the stupidest thing you've ever agreed to, and you spent last night in a stick shelter at minus 71 degrees Celsius, so that's saying something. But Kolya is right. Passive defense isn't working. The wolves are getting bolder with each test. Eventually they'll rush the horses, and then people and animals will both be at risk. Kolya lights his torches from the stove, hands one to you and lights yours from his. The flame catches immediately, flaring bright even in the morning light. Then he lights the others, creating a bundle of fire in each hand. He looks at you, his face serious. Ready? No, you answer honestly. But let's go anyway. He grins. This is Yakutian way. Never ready, always go. He kicks the door open. No slow, careful opening this time, but a dramatic bang, and strides out into the snow, torches held high, shouting in Saka. His voice is enormous, amplified by the cold air, bouncing off the trees. He sounds like a man 3 times his size, like an army of one, and the wolves immediately react, backing away from the sheer aggressive confidence he's projecting. You follow, trying to match his energy, waving your torches and shouting, wordless yelling, just noise, just audio chaos. You position yourself on the opposite side of the horse shelter, creating a barrier between the wolves and their target. The horses calm slightly, sensing protection, though they're still nervous, still ready to bolt. The wolves circle, trying to find an opening. The big male approaches from your side, testing you specifically, probably recognizing you from last night. His eyes lock onto yours, and you see the calculation happening. Is this the same weak creature from the forest, or has it somehow become stronger? You wave your torches at him, creating a wall of flame, and scream directly at his face. Not today. Not happening. Go find a rabbit. He stops, ears flattening, clearly uncertain. You take a step toward him, still waving fire, and he backs up. It's working. The fire does something to them, triggers instincts older and deeper than hunger. Fire means danger, means pain, means flee. But desperation is also an old instinct. A smaller wolf, female, young, possibly inexperienced, tries to dart past Kolya's side, making a run at the horses. Kolya pivots smoothly and swings a torch at her, nearly catching her flank. She yelps and retreats, but the attempt has emboldened the others. If one can try, they all can try. The pack tightens formation, closing the circle, and you realize this is about to escalate. They're past the testing phase. They're committing. The big male howls. Not the calling howl, but a shorter, sharper sound, and 3 wolves rush simultaneously from different directions. It's coordinated, strategic, and terrifying. Kolya fires the rifle, the shot going high but close enough that one wolf veers off course. You swing both torches wildly at another, creating a figure 8 of flame that stops it cold. But the third one gets through, racing past your position toward the horses. The horses rear up, one of them lashing out with its hooves. The strike catches the wolf in the shoulder, and you hear the sickening crunch of impact. The wolf tumbles backward, yelping in pain, and limps away quickly. The horses, you realize, aren't helpless. They're weapons too, their hooves capable of crushing bone, their weight enough to kill a wolf with one good kick. The wolves know this, which is why they're trying to separate one horse from the others, isolate it. Kolya is reloading, you see him work the bolt, and then he aims carefully and fires. This shot isn't into the air. It hits the snow directly in front of the big male, close enough that snow and ice spray into the wolf's face. The male jumps back, startled and finally looking unsure about this whole venture. Again, Kolya shouts to you. Big noise, big fire. Show we don't stop. You wave the torches and scream until your throat is raw, and Kolya does the same, and together you create such an overwhelming sensory assault that the wolves start backing away. Not fleeing yet, but retreating, reconsidering. The pack's formation loosens. Several of them look to the big male, waiting for a signal, a decision. The male stands there, caught between hunger and self-preservation, and you can see the exact moment he makes his choice. His body language changes. Ears coming up slightly, tail lowering, weight shifting backward. He's done. The cost has exceeded the benefit. He barks once, a sharp command, and turns away. The pack follows. Not running, maintaining dignity, but leaving. They disappear into the tree line, and within moments you can't see them anymore, though you can still hear them. The crunch of snow, the occasional low communication bark, the sound of a pack regrouping and moving on to find easier prey. You and Kolya stand there, torches still raised, breathing hard, waiting to see if they'll come back. 5 minutes pass. 10. The forest returns to its usual eerie quiet, broken only by the nervous shuffling of the horses and your own ragged breathing. Finally, Kolya lowers his torches. Is done, he says. They go. Too expensive for them now. They find easier food, maybe hare, maybe weak deer, maybe nothing, and they die. But not here. Not today. You lower your own torches, and the exhaustion hits you like a collapsing building. Your legs wobble, and Kolya catches your arm, steadying you. Is okay. You did good. We defend pack territory. Wolves understand this. They respect this. You look at the horses, still nervous but alive, unharmed except for psychological trauma. You look at the cabin, smoke still rising from its chimney. You look at the tree line where the wolves disappeared, and you realize something. You've just participated in one of the oldest conflicts in human history. The struggle between our species and the predators who see us as competition. It's a struggle that's defined us, shaped our evolution, driven us to create fire and tools and language. And today, for the second time in 24 hours, you won. Not by much, not easily, but you won. The rest of the day passes in a strange calm, like the aftermath of a storm. Kolya insists you stay inside while he checks the horses, makes sure they're settled, reinforces the shelter with extra poles and canvas. You watch through the window as he works, methodical and unhurried, occasionally pausing to scan the tree line. The wolves are gone, he's assured you, but caution is a survival trait out here. You never assume danger has passed just because you can't see it anymore. When he comes back inside, stamping snow off his boots, he's carrying something. Tracks and plaster. He's made a cast of one of the wolf prints, a technique he uses to track pack movements over time. He shows it to you proudly. The print is massive, easily the size of your palm, with clear impressions of 4 toes and claws. "This is your big male," he says, pointing to details in the cast. "See here, front left paw, small damage to pad. Old injury, healed wrong. This wolf, I see his tracks before, maybe 3 weeks ago. He has territory north of here, usually. Coming this far south means his territory has no food. Very bad sign for wolves. Maybe very bad winter this year." You examine the cast, this physical evidence of your nighttime companion. 3 weeks ago, this wolf was just living his life, hunting his territory, doing wolf things. Then winter got hard, prey got scarce, and he made decisions that brought him into contact with you. Twice now. You wonder if he'll remember you, if wolves have that capacity. Historians still argue whether wolves have individual memory of specific humans or just general category recognition. This is human, humans are dangerous. But the question feels important somehow. What happens to them now? You ask. The pack. Kolya shrugs. They hunt. They try. Maybe they find food, maybe they starve. This is nature. Some years, many wolves survive. Some years, few survive. Population goes up, goes down. He pauses. In old Soviet times, government paid bounty for dead wolves. Kill many wolves, get money. My grandfather did this, killed maybe 100 wolves in his life. He thought was good, fewer wolves, safer for livestock, for people. But, you prompt, hearing the hesitation in his voice. But then, no wolves, too many deer. Deer eat all plants, landscape changes. Then disease comes, deer too crowded, disease spreads fast. Many deer die. Then wolves come back, but different balance. My grandfather, before he died, he said maybe killing all wolves was mistake. Maybe wolves are, how you say, necessary. For balance. It's a concept you're familiar with, trophic cascades, the way apex predators regulate entire ecosystems. Remove the predators and everything downstream gets weird. Deer populations explode, overgrazing happens, plant communities shift, erosion increases, even river patterns can change. It sounds mystical, but it's just ecology, the interconnection of everything eating everything else in a complex dance that's been choreographed over millions of years. Your grandfather sounds wise, you say. Kolya smiles. He was stubborn old bastard, but yes, also wise. He tell me many things before he died. How to track, how to hunt, how to respect animal you kill. He say, wolf is not enemy. Wolf is teacher. Wolf teaches you to be alert, to be strong, to work together. I think he was right. The afternoon stretches into evening, and you help Kolya with small tasks. Checking trap lines that he's set near the cabin, processing firewood, preparing food. Your hands are clumsy still, wrapped in bandages, but you can manage basic tasks. The work is meditative, requiring just enough focus to keep you present, but not so much that it's exhausting. At one point, while you're splitting kindling, while Kolya is splitting, you're stacking, he asks about your life outside Yakutia. What brought you here, why you decided to visit the coldest inhabited place on Earth in the middle of winter. You give him the edited version. Fascination with extreme environments, desire to understand how people live in impossible places, the classic tourist motivation of wanting to experience something authentic. He nods along, but then asks the real question, but why alone? Why you walk alone in forest? It's a good question. You'd walked out alone because... Why? Because you wanted to experience the taiga without mediation, without a guide between you and the landscape. Because some part of you needed to test yourself against the environment to prove something? You're not entirely sure. The decision that seemed reasonable yesterday, just a quick walk, I'll be fine, now seems monumentally stupid. I wanted to see it myself. You answer finally. Experience it directly. But I was stupid. I didn't understand what I was walking into. Kolya considers this while splitting another log. Maybe stupid, yes. But also, maybe you understand now what you could not understand before. You walk in forest, you meet wolves, you survive night at 70 below, you find way to cabin. These things you cannot learn from book. You cannot learn from guide. You must do. He points the axe at you for emphasis. Now you know. Now you have story. Now you understand what means to survive in Yakutia. This is worth something, no? You suppose it is. You've gained something, knowledge, experience, a story that will define how you think about cold and danger and survival for the rest of your life. The cost was nearly your life, which seems steep, but you're still here, so maybe the transaction balanced out. As darkness falls, and it falls fast at this latitude, the sun giving up around 3 p.m. and plunging the world into night, Kolya lights the kerosene lamps and starts preparing dinner. He's making stroganina, a traditional Saka dish that's essentially frozen raw fish sliced thin and eaten with salt and spices. The fish is whitefish from the summer catch, frozen solid, and he shaves it with a knife into delicate curls that look almost like flowers. "This is what saved my people," he explains as he works. "In winter, no fresh food. Everything frozen. But frozen fish, frozen meat, this stays good for months. You eat raw because cooking uses fuel, and fuel is expensive. Plus," he adds with a grin, "is delicious." You try it skeptically. Raw frozen fish isn't high on your list of appetizing foods, but he's right. It's delicious. The fish has a clean, pure flavor, and the texture is almost delicate, melting slightly on your tongue. With the salt and the faint smoky spice he's added, it's genuinely good. While you eat, Kolya tells stories. Stories his grandfather told him. Stories passed down through generations of Saka hunters and herders. There's one about a famous hunter named Darkhan who supposedly wrestled a bear and won, though the details get more elaborate with each telling, and Kolya admits he's not sure what actually happened versus what became legend. There's another about a winter so cold that words froze in the air, and people had to wait until spring to hear what had been said in January. That one's definitely a tall tale, but it captures something true about Yakutian winters. The way cold transforms everything, makes the familiar strange. He tells you about the time his grandfather was treed by a pack of wolves, spent an entire night in a larch tree waiting for them to leave, and nearly froze to death from immobility. He say wolves looked up at him, he looked down at wolves, and everyone was too stubborn to quit first. Finally, morning came, wolves left, grandfather climbed down. Couldn't walk right for a week, legs frozen in sitting position. Kolya laughs. He said was stupidest night of his life, but also night he learned patience. The stories flow one into another, and you realize this is what humans do. We create narratives around survival, transform traumatic experiences into stories we can tell, lessons we can share. Your own experience from last night is already becoming a story in your mind. The terror softening into adventure. The desperate fear transforming into earned wisdom. In 10 years, you'll tell people about the night you survived minus 71 degrees Celsius and wolves, and it'll be a good story. You'll leave out the parts where you cried, you did briefly in the shelter, or where you seriously considered just giving up. Those parts don't make the final edit. Around midnight, you're awakened by sounds outside. Not wolves this time, different sounds, mechanical. Kolya is already up, alert, and after a moment you recognize it. A snowmobile. Then voices shouting in Russian and Saka. Kolya goes to the door, opens it, and a small crowd of people tumble in. 3 men and a woman, all bundled in extreme cold gear. There's rapid conversation in Saka that you can't follow, lots of gesturing, and then one of the men spots you and switches to Russian. "You are missing tourist? From Oymyakon." You nod. "I got lost. Kolya found me." The man introduces himself as Dmitri, from the village search and rescue, shakes his head in disbelief. "You survived 2 nights in taiga? In this cold? With wolves?" His tone suggests he's not sure whether to be impressed or call you an idiot. Possibly both. "Mostly 1 night," you clarify. "Last night was difficult. Today I made it here." Dmitri translates for the others, and there's a collective sound of amazement. The woman, Tatiana, she says, a paramedic, comes over and starts examining you, checking your frostbite, asking about symptoms. Her hands are gentle but thorough, and after a few minutes she announces that you're in surprisingly good shape, all things considered. Some tissue damage, definitely, and you'll need to follow up with a proper doctor, but nothing life-threatening. "You should be dead," she says matter-of-factly. "Statistically, tourists who get lost in winter here do not survive. You are very lucky or very tough, or Kolya is very good finder." She smiles at Kolya, who waves off the compliment but looks pleased. The search party has brought supplies, food, medical gear, extra cold weather equipment, and they settle in for the night. It's too dangerous to travel back now, in the dark, so they'll wait until morning. The cabin becomes crowded but warm, full of people and conversation, and the sense of crisis averted. Dmitri explains that they'd started searching yesterday evening when you didn't return. They'd organized quickly. This is a small community, everyone knows everyone, and a missing tourist is everyone's responsibility. They'd searched the obvious routes first, then started expanding outward in a grid pattern. One team had found your original shelter, the stick and snow structure you'd built, and they'd been amazed and concerned in equal measure. "We knew you were alive then," Dmitri says, "because dead people don't build shelters. But we also knew you were in big trouble. They tracked you from there. Your footprints, surprisingly, were still visible in places where snow hadn't drifted over them. They'd found where you encountered the wolves, seen the evidence of the standoff. Many tracks," Dmitri says. "Big pack. 5, 6 wolves, maybe. They followed you long time." 8, Kolya corrects. 8 wolves came here this morning. Wanted my horses. He gestures to you. We defend together. This creates another round of amazed conversation. Tatiana asks if you were injured in the encounter, and you show her your hands. No new damage, just the existing frostbite. She checks them again, nods satisfied. "You have story now," Dmitri says, echoing Kolya's earlier words. "Not many people survive night in taiga at 70 below with wolves. You tell this story, people will not believe you. But we believe you because we see tracks, we see shelter, we see evidence. You did impossible thing. It doesn't feel impossible. It feels like you stumbled through a series of terrible decisions and got lucky that Kolya's cabin was within walking distance and the wolves weren't quite desperate enough to fully commit. But you're learning that survival stories are always like this. A combination of decisions, luck, determination, and the kindness of strangers who are willing to open their cabin doors to half-frozen idiots. The night passes in warmth and safety. You sleep deeply, surrounded by people who've spent their entire lives mastering survival in this impossible place. When you wake, dawn is breaking. Another gray, cold morning. But this one holds the promise of return to civilization. Before you leave, Kolya gives you something. The plaster cast of the wolf print. "You keep this," he says. "Remember your teacher. Remember what Wolf taught you. You take it carefully, this physical memory of your nighttime companion. The wolf who tested you, waited for you, taught you what it means to defend your space and your life. You'll carry this print home, display it somewhere prominent, and every time you see it, you'll remember. Survival is never guaranteed, teachers come in unexpected forms, and respect flows both ways between predators. The snowmobile ride back to Oymyakon is cold but manageable, and when you arrive, there's a small crowd waiting. News has traveled ahead by satellite phone. People want to see the tourist who survived, who built a shelter, who faced down wolves. You're embarrassed by the attention but also grateful for it. These people dropped everything to search for a stranger, risked themselves in brutal cold, and expected nothing in return except that you survive. That night, warm and safe in a real bed, you hear wolves howling in the distance. The sound that terrified you 2 nights ago now sounds different. Not threatening, just wolves being wolves, calling across their territories, coordinating hunts, living their lives in a landscape that's trying to kill everything equally. You hope the big male finds food. You hope his pack survives the winter. You hope that someday, maybe, he'll remember the night he tested a strange creature in the forest and decided it was too expensive to pursue. And somewhere in the taiga, under the winter stars, a pack of wolves moves through the snow, still hungry, still searching, still surviving against impossible odds, just like you. The doctor in Oymyakon is a woman named Dr. Ivanova, who speaks perfect English with a faint British accent. She studied in London, she explains, before returning to Yakutia because someone has to take care of the stubborn people who live here. She examines your frostbite injuries with the practiced eye of someone who's seen this particular damage countless times. Her clinic is small but well-equipped, heated to what feels like tropical temperatures after your time in the taiga. 2nd-degree frostbite on 3 fingers, both big toes and patches on your nose and cheeks. She announces, making notes on a chart. Could be worse. Could be much worse. I've seen people lose entire hands from less exposure time. You must have kept moving, kept blood flowing. Smart. She applies Silvadene cream to the affected areas with careful precision. This will hurt for a few weeks. The skin will blister, peel, possibly scar. The nails on these toes might fall off and regrow. All normal. What's not normal is you being alive to complain about it. She prescribes antibiotics to prevent infection, pain medication that you probably won't take because you've developed a weird pride about enduring discomfort, and strict instructions about wound care. Then she leans back in her chair and studies you with frank curiosity. What made you walk alone into the taiga? She asks. Not judgment. I'm genuinely curious. We get maybe 50 tourists per winter here, and most of them stay close to the village, take guided tours, follow all the safety protocols. You went out alone in the coldest part of winter without even basic emergency supplies. Why? It's a question you've been asking yourself. The answer that made sense 3 days ago. I wanted authentic experience, unmediated encounter with the landscape. Now seems hollow, tourist philosophy masking poor judgment. But there's something else, something you've been circling around in your thoughts. I think I needed to understand what it means to be truly vulnerable. You say slowly, working it out as you speak. In my normal life, I'm insulated from everything. Climate control, food delivery, emergency services minutes away. I've never had to fight for survival, never faced genuine danger. And I think some part of me needed to know if I could. If it came down to it, in the most extreme circumstances, could I survive? Dr. Ivanova nods thoughtfully. And now you know. Now I know, you agree. Though I'm not sure the knowledge was worth the price. She smiles. That's wisdom. Real wisdom, earned wisdom. The difference between knowledge and wisdom is cost. Knowledge is free, you read book, thing. Wisdom is expensive, you nearly die, you learn thing. You have wisdom now about cold, about wolves, about your own limits. This wisdom, no one can take from you. She finishes wrapping your fingers and toes in fresh bandages, then hands you a pamphlet about frostbite recovery. You'll heal. Physically, completely, probably within 8 weeks. Psychologically. She shrugs. That's different. Some people who survive trauma in Yakutia never come back. Some people come back every year. We'll see which type you are. Over the next few days, you become a minor celebrity in Oymyakon. People stop you in the street. Well, street is generous. It's more a packed snow path between buildings to ask about your experience. The village elder, a man named Nikolai Mihailovich who looks like he's approximately 100 years old, invites you to tea and listens to your story with patient attention. The wolves, he says when you finish, they were testing. This is good. Testing means they are healthy, smart, following proper wolf behavior. Sick wolves or desperate wolves, they don't test, they attack immediately. Your wolves, they were hungry but not yet desperate. You were lucky in your unlucky situation. He tells you about the winter of 1967, when a pack of rabid wolves terrorized the region for weeks. Rabies makes wolves crazy brave, he explains. They attack everything, people, dogs, horses, each other. We lost 8 people that winter before we tracked down the pack and killed them. Very bad time. He sips his tea thoughtfully. Your wolves were not rabid, just hungry. This is much better situation. The conversation shifts to wolf ecology, and you learn that the local wolf population has actually been increasing in recent years, which Nikolai Mihailovich views as a mixed blessing. More wolves means ecosystem is healthy, enough prey to support predators, but also means more conflict with humans. We lose livestock, sometimes horses. Government pays compensation, but money doesn't replace good horse. He pauses. Still, I prefer living with wolves to living without. Wolves keep deer populations controlled, keep ecosystem balanced. Without wolves, whole landscape changes. We learned this in Soviet times. He's referring to the massive predator eradication campaigns of the mid-20th century, when Soviet policy encouraged the elimination of wolves, bears, and other large predators seen as threats to agricultural productivity. The unintended consequences were severe. Herbivore populations exploded, overgrazing degraded pastureland, disease spread through crowded deer populations, and the entire ecological balance shifted. Historians still argue whether the subsequent reintroduction of wolves was intentional policy or just acceptance of inevitable natural recolonization. But the result was clear. The predators came back, and the ecosystem stabilized. Nature finds balance, Nikolai Mihailovich says. Always. We can help or we can interfere, but nature finds balance. Wolves are part of balance. You surviving in forest, this is also balance. You respected wolves. Wolves respected you. Everyone survives. This is how it should be. You spend time with Kolya, who's returned to the village with his winter catch. Several sable pelts that will fetch good money in the fur market. He introduces you to his family. His wife Serdana, who's practical and warm and treats you like you're a particularly dim but endearing nephew. His daughter Aisha, who's 13 and speaks better English than you speak Russian and peppers you with questions about America. And his father, old Victor, who doesn't speak English at all but communicates through nods and vodka toasts. Serdana feeds you constantly, convinced that you're still recovering from starvation despite eating 3 meals a day. You are too thin, she declares, serving you another portion of salamat, a thick porridge made from flour, butter, and sour cream that's approximately 9 million calories per serving. In Yakutia, thin people don't survive winter. You need fat for insulation for energy. Eat. You eat. It's delicious and heavy and makes you understand how people survive here through sheer caloric intake, layering internal insulation to match the external furs and wool. Aisha wants to hear every detail of your wolf encounter. She's studying ecology in school and has opinions about wolf behavior that are surprisingly sophisticated. They were practicing pack coordination, she explains. Young wolves, they need to learn hunting strategies from older wolves. Maybe your pack had young members who needed teaching. You were practice prey, not too dangerous, but dangerous enough to be good training. It's an interesting perspective you hadn't considered. Maybe the wolves weren't just evaluating you as food. Maybe they were using you as an educational opportunity, teaching younger pack members how to assess threats, coordinate attacks, and recognize when to disengage. You're not sure whether this makes you feel better or worse about the experience. Old Victor, through Kolya's translation, tells you about his own wolf encounter from 40 years ago. He'd been ice fishing alone when a wolf approached his shelter. I had no weapon, Kolya translates, just ice auger and fishing rod. Wolf sat down outside, maybe 3 meters away, just sat and watched me fish. For an hour, maybe 2 hours. Father says he was terrified at first, then just curious. Why was Wolf sitting there? What did Wolf want? Victor had eventually caught a fish, a large one, and on impulse had tossed it toward the wolf. Wolf took fish and left. Kolya continues. Father thought maybe Wolf was just lonely, or bored, or curious about human. Or maybe Wolf was very smart. Sit near human, human catches fish, wolf gets fish. Who knows? But after that, Father says he understood wolves different. Not always enemy. Sometimes just neighbor. The story resonates with your own experience. The big male wolf who tracked you, tested you, ultimately decided you weren't worth the effort. Was that predation or was that something more complex? An intelligent creature making risk calculations, evaluating a strange entity in its territory, choosing the path of least resistance? You'll never know what was happening in that wolf's mind, but you're increasingly comfortable with the ambiguity. Dr. Ivanova checks your wounds again before you're scheduled to leave Oymyakon. The blisters are forming properly, which apparently is good news, and the tissue underneath looks healthy. You'll have some scarring, she confirms. But nothing dramatic. Small price for the story you'll tell for the rest of your life. She's not wrong. You're already mentally composing how you'll describe this to friends, family, strangers at parties. The night at -71°C, the wolves circling, the desperate shelter building, Kolya's rescue, the defense of the horses. It's an epic narrative, and you're aware that you'll probably embellish slightly with each telling, emphasizing the dramatic moments, downplaying the long stretches of cold misery and fear. That's what humans do. We craft our traumas into stories, shape our experiences into narratives that make sense. that teach lessons, that entertain. But underneath the story is the raw experience, the thing that happened before you had words for it. That moment in the darkness when you locked eyes with the wolf through your shelter's entrance. The bone-deep cold that made you understand mortality in a visceral way. The exhaustion so complete that dying seemed like a reasonable alternative to taking another step. Those moments don't translate into words easily. They live in your body now, cellular memories that will surface unexpectedly. When you feel cold air on your face, when you hear a dog howl, when you're safe and warm and suddenly remember what it felt like to be neither. The indigenous Saka people have a concept, Jil, which roughly translates to the profound awareness of survival, that Nikolai Mihailovich tries to explain to you during another tea session. Is not just knowing you survived, he says through Aisha's translation, is knowing in your bones, in your blood, in your soul that you walked close to death and came back. This changes person, makes you different, not better, not worse, just different. You have Jill now. You think you understand. You're not the same person who walked into the taiga 3 days ago. That person was curious, naive, insulated by modern life from genuine danger. This person, the one who's sitting here drinking tea with bandaged fingers and toes, who startles at unexpected sounds, who feels a weird kinship with large predators, has been fundamentally altered by proximity to death. On your last night in Oymyakon, there's a small gathering at Kolya's house. It's not quite a party, more an informal celebration of your survival and impending departure. Sardana cooks a feast. Stroganina, salamat, indijurka, a salad made with frozen fish that sounds terrible but tastes amazing, and endless tea. Old Victor produces a bottle of something clear and potent that makes your eyes water. Toasts are made to survival, to wolves, to stubborn tourists, to the taiga that tests everyone equally. Kolya presents you with a gift, a small carved figure, about the size of your thumb, depicting a wolf. I make this, he explains, from larch wood. You remember, wolf is teacher. Wolf teaches you strength, teaches you respect, teaches you when to fight and when to run. Good lessons. You're touched more than you expected to be. You've known these people for a handful of days, but they've welcomed you, searched for you, fed you, shared their stories and vodka. This is what survival means in extreme places, not individual achievement, but community support, the understanding that everyone's survival is linked. Aisha wants to know if you'll come back. Maybe in summer? She suggests. Yakutia is beautiful in summer. Everything green, river running, midnight sun. You can see why people choose to live here. You promise you'll consider it, though you're not sure if that's true. Part of you wants to return to experience this place in a different season, to understand the full cycle. But another part wants to preserve this memory exactly as it is. Winter, wolves, survival, the knife edge between life and death. Coming back in summer might dilute that, turn it into tourism rather than ordeal. That night, lying in your warm bed for the last time, you hear the wolves howling. They sound distant, possibly several kilometers away, but in the quiet night their voices carry clearly. You listen to them for a long time, tracking the different voices. That one's the big male, you're almost certain, and there's the young female, and the silent ghost making sounds now in the safety of darkness. They're hunting, probably, calling to coordinate positions, drive prey toward an ambush, communicate success or failure. They're doing exactly what they've been doing for hundreds of thousands of years, what they'll keep doing long after you've gone, after everyone currently alive has gone. They're survivors in the truest sense, adapted perfectly to an environment that kills nearly everything else. You survived their attention. That's something. That's maybe everything. And as you drift off to sleep, warm and safe and fundamentally changed, you send them a silent thought. Good hunting. May you find food. May you survive the winter. May your pack grow strong. Teachers deserve that much respect. The journey back to civilization, real civilization with airports and heated buildings and people who've never experienced minus 70 degrees Celsius, takes 2 days. First, a truck ride to Yakutsk, bouncing over roads that are more suggestion than infrastructure, past tiny settlements that make Oymyakon look cosmopolitan. Then a flight south, the landscape below transforming from endless white taiga to forests showing patches of bare ground, to finally regions where winter means mere freezing, rather than the existential cold of Yakutia. You spend most of the journey processing, replaying events in your mind, trying to solidify memories before they blur into general impressions. The way the cold felt, not just uncomfortable but actively malevolent, a presence trying to squeeze life from your body. The sound of wolves howling in stereo, surrounding your shelter. Kolya's face when he first saw you stumbling toward his cabin. The precise moment you decided to charge at the wolves rather than retreat. These memories need preservation, need to be locked down before time smooths their edges. On the flight, your seatmate is a Russian businessman returning from mineral surveys near Yakutsk. He notices your bandaged hands, asks about your trip in accented but fluent English. You give him the abbreviated version. Got lost, spent night in taiga, survived wolves, rescued by local hunter. He listens with the polite attention of someone making conversation, and then he says something that surprises you. You know, my grandfather was sent to Yakutia during Stalin's time. Political prisoner, worked in gold mines. He survived 5 years there, came back different person. Never talked about it much, but sometimes he would say, "The cold teaches you what matters." I never understood this until now, hearing your story. The cold teaches you what matters. Everything else is negotiable. You think about this. What did the cold teach you? That survival is always provisional, never guaranteed. That comfort is a luxury, not a right. That your body is both weaker and stronger than you imagined. Weaker because it can fail so quickly in extreme conditions. Stronger because it kept functioning when failure meant death. That fear and determination can coexist. That you can be terrified and still take the next step, and the next, and the next. The businessman nods as you explain this. Yes, exactly this. My grandfather, he said people in cities forget they are animals, forget they have bodies that need warmth and food and shelter. Yakutia reminds you, forces you to remember you are animal first, person second. This is valuable lesson, even if expensive lesson. He's right. The experience was expensive. You'll probably lose a toenail, definitely have scars, certainly have nightmares about cold and wolves for months or years. But you've gained something too. A recalibration of what matters, what's genuinely worth worrying about versus what's just noise. Traffic jams, work deadlines, social media drama. These seem absurdly trivial now compared to the simple, elegant problem of staying alive through the night. Back home. And home feels different now. Softer and safer and slightly unreal. People want to hear your story. Friends, family, co-workers, they all gather around when they hear you survived a night at minus 71 degrees Celsius with wolves. You tell the story repeatedly, each time finding slightly different emphasis, testing which details resonate. Some people are horrified. Why would you go there in winter? They ask, as if the answer isn't obvious. Couldn't you have visited in summer? They focus on the danger, the foolishness, the near-death experience. These people make you defensive, make you want to justify your decisions, prove it was worth it. Others are fascinated. What did the wolves look like? They ask. What does minus 71 degrees Celsius actually feel like? How did you know what to do? These people want to understand, to vicariously experience something so far outside their normal lives. You're more generous with details for them, describing the crystalline quality of breath fog, the intelligent calculation in wolf eyes, the bone-deep exhaustion of fighting hypothermia. A few people, usually older, usually with their own survival stories, just nod. They understand without needing extensive explanation. One elderly veteran, a friend of your father's, listens to your 5-minute summary and says, "The cold gets inside you, stays there. You'll feel it sometimes, even years later, even on warm days. That's normal." He taps his chest. "It lives here now, part of you." You're starting to understand what he means. Sometimes randomly you'll feel a phantom cold, a sensation of your fingers going numb, or a flash of that deep, invasive chill that characterized your night in the shelter. It's not real cold, just your nervous system remembering, replaying the trauma in small doses. Dr. Ivanova had mentioned this might happen. "Body keeps the score," she'd said. "Your nervous system learned to recognize extreme danger. Now it's hypersensitive, practicing that recognition. Will fade with time. Probably. The physical wounds heal on schedule. Your fingers and toes blister, peel, reveal new pink skin underneath that's tender and oversensitive. The toenail on your right big toe turns black and eventually falls off. You keep it in a small jar, a weird souvenir of survival. New nail grows in slowly, looking slightly different than the original, a permanent mark of what happened. The psychological integration takes longer. You have dreams about wolves, not nightmares exactly, but intense dreams where you're running through taiga, or standing in clearings surrounded by watching eyes, or sometimes just sitting beside a fire while wolves circle at the edge of light. In the dreams, you're never quite sure if they're threatening or just observing. You wake from these dreams feeling strange. Not frightened, but heightened. Alert in a way that doesn't fit your normal life. A therapist you see because your insurance covers it and you figure it can't hurt, suggests you might have mild PTSD. Survival situations create powerful memories, she explains. Your brain encoded everything from that night with extra intensity because it was life or death. Now those memories have priority access. They can intrude into consciousness more easily than normal memories. This is your brain's way of saying, remember this. Don't get into this situation again. But you find yourself wanting to get into similar situations, or at least to understand them better. You start researching extreme environments, not just cold, but heat, altitude, isolation. You read accounts of Antarctic expeditions, Sahara crossings, solo ocean voyages. There's a pattern in these stories. People push themselves to the edge, discover capabilities they didn't know they had, come back changed. The specific environment varies, but the transformation is consistent. You realize you're part of a tradition now, an ancient human pattern of seeking ordeal, testing limits, finding yourself through hardship. The vision quests of indigenous peoples, the pilgrimages of religious traditions, the expeditions of explorers, all variations on the same theme. Voluntary difficulty as a path to understanding. Chosen suffering as teacher. The wolf carving Kolia gave you sits on your desk, a small wooden reminder. You touch it sometimes unconsciously when you're thinking or stressed. The wood is smooth, worn by handling, and you find the texture comforting. Colleagues ask about it. Nice paperweight, they say, or where'd you get that? And you give them the short version. Gift from a friend in Russia. Reminder of a trip. They nod, losing interest, not understanding that this thumb-sized carving represents an entire philosophical transformation. You stay in touch with Kolya via occasional emails. His English is terrible, your Russian worse, but you manage basic communication. He sends updates. The wolves have been spotted again, but farther north. Their pack numbers seem stable. The big male, your big male, you've started thinking of him, was seen with fresh kill, meaning he's eating, surviving. This news makes you unreasonably happy. Kolya tells you one of his horses had a foal in spring, a healthy female that's already showing the characteristic stockiness of Yakut horses. He names her something in Saka that Aisha translates in a follow-up email as roughly meaning survivor or possibly stubborn one. Kolya writes, "She reminds me of you. Strong head, doesn't quit." His compliment in Yakutia. 6 months after your ordeal, you receive a package from Oymyakon. Inside is a photograph, the plaster cast of the wolf print, but now mounted on a wooden plaque with a small brass plate. The inscription is in Russian and English. Teacher and student, Winter 2026. Below that, Kolya has carved additional text in Saka script that Aisha explains means approximately, "He who walks with wolves learns to howl." There's also a letter, written in Aisha's careful English, dictated by Kolya. "Friend, I hope your wounds heal good. We think of you sometimes, wonder how the South treats you now that you know real cold. Father, old Victor, says you have deal now, the survival knowing, and this never leaves. He is right, I think. The taiga is different every season. Winter is teacher, but summer is healer. Spring is birth, autumn is preparation. Maybe you come back someday, see other faces of Yakutia. Or maybe one time is enough. Both answers are correct. The wolves are well. We see tracks, hear howls. They survive their winter as you survived yours. Nature balances. Sardana says I should tell you, you are always welcome in our home. First time you came as stranger who needs rescue. Next time you come as friend who knows way. This is progress. Stay warm, friend. Or if you cannot stay warm, stay strong. In Yakutia, strong is more important than comfortable. Your brother in survival, Kolya, you read the letter multiple times, feeling emotions you don't quite have words for. Gratitude, certainly. Connection. A sense of belonging to something larger than yourself. A global community of survivors, of people who've faced extremes and come back to tell about it. You mount the wolf print plaque on your wall, next to the small wooden carving. Together they form a shrine to transformation, a reminder of who you were and who you became. Sometimes, when you're stressed about trivial things, deadlines, bills, relationship drama, you look at these objects and hear Kolya's voice. In Yakutia, strong is more important than comfortable. It becomes your mantra, your touchstone. When things get difficult, you ask yourself, is this minus 71 degrees Celsius difficult or just uncomfortable? Am I facing wolves or just inconvenience? The perspective helps. Most problems aren't actually problems, just minor irritations that feel larger than they are because you're not actively fighting for survival. A year after your ordeal, you give a talk at a local adventure club. 30 people gather to hear about your experience, and you tell them everything, the mistakes, the fear, the wolves, the rescue, the lessons. You show them the wolf print, pass around the wooden carving. You try to convey not just the facts but the feeling, the transformation. During Q&A, someone asks, "Would you do it again?" You think carefully before answering. Not exactly the same way. I made real mistakes and I was lucky to survive them. But would I seek out another extreme experience, another test? Yes, absolutely. Because that night in the taiga taught me more about myself than the previous 30 years of comfortable living. It recalibrated my understanding of what I'm capable of, what matters, what's real versus what's just noise. Another person asks, "What about the wolves? Are you afraid of them now?" "No," you answer, surprising yourself with the certainty. "I respect them. I understand their power, their intelligence, their right to exist in their territory. But fear? No. Fear comes from not understanding. I understand wolves now, at least a little. We're not enemies. We're just different species trying to survive in a difficult world. Sometimes those interests conflict, and then you negotiate with noise, fire, determination. But mostly, if you respect their space and they respect yours, coexistence is possible." You think about this later, realize it applies to more than just wolves. So many human conflicts come from fear of the other, from not understanding different perspectives. If you can learn to respect wolves, predators who could literally kill you, maybe you can learn to respect people whose views differ from yours. Maybe the lesson of the taiga extends beyond survival into how you approach all of life. The talk ends, people clap. A few come up to ask more questions or share their own survival stories. A young woman tells you about getting lost while hiking in the Rockies, spending a night without gear, finding her way out at dawn. An older man describes surviving a shipwreck in his Navy days, floating on debris until rescue came. These stories multiply, interweave, create a tapestry of human resilience. You realize this is why people seek out these experiences, why every culture has ordeals and vision quests and coming-of-age rituals that involve difficulty. We need to test ourselves, to discover our limits, to prove we can survive what seems unsurvivable. It's built into us, this drive to push boundaries, to stand at the edge of capability and see what's beyond. That night, alone in your apartment, warm and safe and comfortable, you stand at your window and look out at the city. The temperature outside is maybe 5 degrees Celsius, cold by the standards of people who've never experienced real cold, but almost laughably mild to you now. You think about Yakutia, about endless taiga and wolves moving through darkness, about Kolya checking his trap lines and Sardana feeding her family and Aisha studying ecology and dreaming of bigger worlds. You think about the big male wolf, somewhere in those endless forests, leading his pack through another winter. Does he remember you? Probably not. You were just one of many potential meals evaluated and rejected. But you remember him. You carry him with you, this teacher who showed you what it means to be genuinely alive, genuinely alert, genuinely present in the moment between breath and breath. And somewhere, impossibly distant but somehow close, you hear it. A wolf's howl, carried on northern wind, crossing thousands of kilometers to reach you. It's not real. It's memory, imagination, the phantom sensation your nervous system has learned to produce. But real or not, you listen. You honor it. You acknowledge the teaching. In Yakutia, they say winter teaches and summer heals. But what you learned in that frozen darkness stays with you through all seasons, all years, all of life. You're stronger now, not because you survived one night at minus 71 degrees Celsius, but because you learned what strength actually means. Not invulnerability, that's impossible. Not fearlessness, that's foolish. But determination, resilience, the stubborn refusal to lie down in the snow and give up. The wolves taught you this. The cold taught you this. Kolya and his family taught you this. And now you carry it forward. This hard-won wisdom, this expensive knowledge, this gift that nearly killed you but instead made you more fully alive. You earned winter's respect. You walked through fire, or rather, through its opposite, through cold so profound it becomes almost fire-like in its burning. And you came back changed, carrying stories and scars and the deep certainty that you're capable of more than you imagined. That certainty, more than anything else, is what makes survival worth the cost. Because now you know, not theoretically, not abstractly, but in your bones, in your blood, in that place old Victor called Yul, the profound awareness of survival. You know what you're made of. You've tested it against wolves and cold and darkness and found it sufficient. And that knowledge, that bone-deep certainty, changes everything. The city lights blur slightly as you stand at the window, and you realize you're tired. Not the desperate exhaustion of hypothermia, but the good tired of a full day lived completely. Tomorrow you'll wake to alarm clocks and coffee and the mundane business of modern life. Bills to pay, work to do, relationships to navigate, all the complex machinery of civilization that insulates you from the raw necessities of survival. But underneath all that, running like a deep current, you'll carry this: you survived. You built shelter with frozen hands. You faced down predators. You walked through killing cold and came out the other side. These facts can't be taken from you, can't be diminished by time or routine or the slow erosion of memory. You are, fundamentally and forever, someone who survived Yakutia's winter. Someone who looked into wolf eyes and didn't blink. Someone who earned respect from the coldest inhabited place on Earth. And on nights when the city feels too loud, too bright, too insulated from reality, you'll remember the silence of the taiga, the honesty of cold, the pure clarity of survival. You'll touch the wooden wolf, trace the plaster paw print, and know that somewhere in the endless north, teachers still roam through darkness, still hunt, still survive against impossible odds. Just like you did, just like you will, whatever challenges come. Because winter taught you well, and its lessons last forever. The cold gets inside you, as the veteran said, stays there, becomes part of who you are. And maybe that's not a curse. Maybe it's a gift. The gift of knowing, truly knowing, that you're capable of facing the impossible and walking through it to the other side. That when everything is stripped away, comfort, security, certainty, there's still something solid underneath. Something that doesn't quit. Something that keeps moving forward. One step and then another, until the darkness becomes dawn and survival becomes story. You close your eyes, feel the phantom cold one more time, and smile. Tomorrow awaits with all its mundane challenges and small frustrations. But you've faced wolves at 71 below zero. Everything else is just weather. Stay strong, friend, as Kolya would say. Strong is more important than comfortable. And you are strong. Winter proved it. The wolves confirmed it. And now you carry that strength forward. A survivor's gift, earned in darkness and cold, and the honest company of predators who taught you to respect both life and death. The howl echoes once more in memory, and this time you understand it completely. Not a threat, not a warning, just acknowledgement. One survivor to another, across the vast distance, saying, I see you, I recognize you, we both know what it takes. And that recognition, that hard-won mutual respect between human and wolf, between you and winter, between fear and courage, that's worth everything you paid for it. Sweet dreams, survivor. You've earned them,